You could have an A1C, let's say that's 5.5, and that's technically in the reference range. But if your insulin is north of 15 or 20, you're insulin resistant. And if you're really monitoring it, do a fructosamine test. You could order them right on Amazon.
I have something that I wanted to debate with you. I had Broderick Chavez on the podcast, and
it told him he needs a statin, all these different things. But why he had like a blockage is because of the diabetes and pre-diabetes, which statins, their mechanism of action is in the liver. So there are some people that can develop type 2 diabetes from a statin. So in this guy's case, he would have been better off doing Repatha to save so many people's lives, is incorporating a low dose of Eliquis. It's a prescription anticoagulant, but it's not like your Coumadin or Warfarin that you bump a wall and your whole arm is black and blue. Back training is totally different than any other muscle group because one, the exercise selection is everything, and that could vary. What's the point of pushing this, staying on certain PEDs when you can't maximize them? So after they're in that recomp, you remove the anavar after some time and then start walking the doses up with the injectables. We have someone that was starting off at 500 tests, 350 primo. After the anavar is removed, say you go up on the test to 625, but you would go up each. If you're 17 pounds under your weight cap, you can probably, no joke, put on at least 25 pounds and get to the point where you have to suck down to actually make the weight. Even from your last show, if you put on 10 pounds of tissue in the right areas, then you'll be highly competitive to win the pro show.
I think my problem is trying to keep my gut and my waistline in check while I'm doing this. How much insulin do you feel like you actually need in order for you to affect your long-term hypertrophy rather than just giving your pancreas a break?
You went to Now Hair Time too, right?
Yeah, I went to Now Hair Time and it was awesome, man. And all these people were just like, dude, why did you even get the hair transplant? Like, I feel like you didn't need it.
You have, right?
And I just didn't want to say anything because I'm just like watch when I actually make a post, and then people are going to start throwing some hate when the entire time people are saying that they couldn't tell. The real reason that they couldn't tell is because I just I got a little bit of a. I'm not afraid. Like I'll always say something. I
put Topic in my hair all the time.
What's up?
I put Topic in my hair to kind of cover up any of the like balding spots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like my hair's not that bad. But
your hair looks awesome, dude.
Yeah, but I do have a little bit of Topic in. Like when I get out of the shower,
yeah,
you can definitely see it. But I was going there too for my teeth was the more important part.
To Turkey?
Yeah.
Okay. What for?
So I had a botched root canal here in Vegas, and I was going for a dental implant, and it was like $5,500 for one implant here. And I had to get my bottom teeth fixed. So I reached out to them originally about the hair, and then I saw that they were expanding their business where they were offering a whole aesthetic side where they were doing teeth. So I sent them a picture of my teeth, and they were like, look, like, yeah, we can fix it for you, do the dental implant. The only thing that kind of sucked is my top teeth were perfect before, but to match the top teeth with the bottoms, they had to do my top teeth, which when they do veneers, they shave down your teeth. It's kind of scary.
Yeah.
Like.
Right. Even though they look fucking sick.
Yeah, no, they look good. I didn't do like the Hollywood white. I feel like some people get them done and they look.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
Like horse teeth, where it's like, whoa. So I just wanted them to look how they naturally did. So they went there. They drilled like the anchor or whatever into like my jaw. Yeah. Put the implant in. I have to go back, which I plan on going back in December to get the actual implant screwed in. And they did my bottom teeth and they took care of all my teeth. What happened with the hair, which are we recording now? Yeah. Yeah. So what happened with the hair is which I was surprised, I'd never heard of this before with a hair restoration place. When you land, they do like, I guess, basic blood work and an EKG. Did they do one on you?
Yes, immediately.
They better have, because I'm like, if I find out that you guys didn't do this on every other bodybuilder, but no. So when we landed, mind you, it was like a 10-hour flight. I did an EKG and I had slight T-wave inversion, which, dude, is super normal for a bodybuilder. If you have like a little bit of left ventricle hypertrophy, if you're dehydrated, it's relatively like normal. And they actually gave me an echocardiogram there too, and that came back perfect. So while I was there, after they did the first like teeth analysis, I went back to my hotel and I started researching because I saw people at the airport that like had their children there that were going there for medical procedures. And I was wondering, I'm like, man, I wonder if you can get an angiogram done here, because they're impossible to get done. They're very hard usually to get them done here. So I found a place there that specialized in all like cardiovascular testing. And instead of getting the hair done on the last day, which I could have, I went and got an angiogram done instead.
Damn.
Yeah.
Priorities, brother.
Yeah. I mean, just because I know that they're pretty hard to get done here.
Yeah.
You can get a calcium score and your basic echo, but a calcium score is very, very basic, and it's only checking really for hard plaque, where an angiogram is more of, you know, your holy grail, or it's going to test for more soft plaque,
right?
You know, coronary artery disease. So, and I got those results back and they were good.
Right. Some people are just a little bit worried about that very, very slight risk. I'm assuming, but like, I mean,
the contrast.
Yeah. But it's like, you're not, how many times are you going to get an angiogram?
Yeah. I mean,
a few times.
Like anything else, the same thing with bodybuilding. It's, you know, calculated like risks. Like for people that were competing or using performance enhancing drugs for extended periods of time, or have a history of cardiovascular disease, it's definitely worth doing. Same thing with, even here in Vegas, the clinic I used to work at, we offer all the pre-cancer screening, something called the Galleri test, and the Pernovia scan.
Pernuvo.
Yes.
I love that one. So I was going to do it, but my doctor convinced me out of it.
I mean, dude, if you're under 50 years old.
Yeah. Wait, how old do you think I am? Just by, if you had to guess, I guess, like how I look
28,
or something. Yeah.
30.
There's a lot of people that usually guess around 28. I just don't tell, because there's always those comments. Like if you look at my last post with the Now Hair Time post, there's people that are just like, dude, this guy looks so fucking old now. And that's why I just don't say it. So that way I can just enjoy myself.
You could take a picture. It's the same thing with like lighting. I could show you a picture of someone and they look absolutely insane. And I could say, look, that's 2 years later and it looks like they made a ton of progress, and then show you another picture in terrible lighting, or like terrible stage production. You
see all the bags and stuff in their eyes and everything. And just
so, but yeah, so I ended up doing that, and I'll go back and get the hair done and the implant done in December.
Gotcha. Nice.
Yeah.
But you were talking about the Pernuvo scan though.
Yeah. So with that, and they offer it here at Ageless, and there's a bunch of places that, and it's an incredible test. They also offer the Galleri test, which a Galleri test is more, it's a blood test, but it can still detect, I believe it's 45 or 50 different types of cancer before it's even the size of a grain of salt. However, like for somebody like that's younger, like us, if you're under 50 years old, does it make sense really to do it? Of course you can, especially if cancer runs in your family. But once you turn 50 years old, your chances of cancer like quadruple once you turn 50. And obviously like your exposure, your environment, things like that play a role into it. But it's worth every dollar. The Galleri test, I think it's $800. You get them, you can get one done like once a year. And some of the testimonials that I've seen from it, like it's a huge eye opener for sure. Because cancer usually boils down to when you catch it.
Okay.
Like if it's spread anywhere.
Would you say a good middle place to be? I don't know. I feel like as a bodybuilder, it would be good to make an excuse to get that scan earlier, especially if you're utilizing certain things that you feel like are going to exacerbate some of those issues, like, you know,
if you're running high amounts of like different types of IGF, things like that, and cancer runs in your family.
Right.
Remember that most everything, like even in bodybuilding, most of it's genetic and from a hereditary standpoint. So even like when I do a consultation on someone, I kind of do two different types of risk factors, like more so like from the health hereditary standpoint, and also like genetically speaking of where they can be at from a body composition standpoint. Because you know as well as I do that everyone has certain limits to their potential. There's people out there that can take 5 grams of gear a week, and their potential might be to place top 10 at a national show. You know, so it's important in the beginning to establish that.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm. Can you explain the difference, just if you could explain in a way that people can visualize just how big is the difference between people who take 5 grams of gear and can't place top 10 in a national show and people who take, say, 2.5 total grams of gear year round and will place like top 5 at Olympia?
Of course. I mean, it all boils down to genetics. And when I say genetics, some people's ability to put muscle tissue on is superior to others. Genetics also means too, from like a muscle tie-in standpoint, you know, like where your muscle tie-ins, your insertions, like your glute and hamstring tie-ins, like how far down do they come? All of that is, you know, it's all genetic. And when we're born, we're pretty much dealt a genetic card at birth, right? And that's really what you're able to in terms of being able to maximize each avenue. And when I say genetics, I also refer to, you could also have some, which I've seen this, which this is a shame, when you have someone that has great genetic potential aesthetically in terms of beautiful structure, their bodies are hyper responsive to being able to put on muscle tissue, you know, drop body fat, but their body doesn't metabolize drugs the same way. That's also a major genetic component as well, that everyone metabolizes these drugs entirely different.
So how much in your client base throughout your entire life, how much do you feel like you've seen a variance in someone's potential genetically?
Oh, I mean, there's huge, like, you know, and the important thing, like from a coach's standpoint that me and my team do, and like my coaches are on the same wavelength too, is you have to be realistic and set realistic expectations with people. And sometimes like these conversations might be slightly difficult conversation to have when you have someone that has aspirations of, you know, contending to win an Olympia title, but you have to kind of be upfront with them and tell them, you know, what's realistic, because it's a lot better that you have those types of hard conversations earlier than after someone has dedicated so much time, so much work, potentially shaved a couple of years off their life. And then they're sitting down at a show like, damn, like, and reality ends up smacking them in the face. It's a hard reality check. Mm-hmm. When you're able to establish that a little bit earlier on, you know, it makes the journey a lot more like realistic too.
Yeah. One of my favorite ways that was described was by, I don't know if you know Ziegler Monster.
Yeah, but I think he lives here too in Vegas.
Yeah, right? Yeah, he's in Vegas. We had a great podcast, and he was like, the problem with bodybuilding and the short lifespans is that there's a lot of people who continue to take, what did he use? I think his term was mega dosages.
I heard this clip before. Yeah.
Mega dosages.
And he referenced like, you know, the 40-year-old accountant or bouncer. Yeah.
Who just continue to take these mega dosages for a goal that may not exist. It's like they don't really take a step back and try to look at it from a realistic standpoint of like, how much is this actually going to contribute to my life, to my family, to moving forward? Like, is this actually something that's like a potential? Like, how long have I been striving for this and not been achieving it?
Yeah.
And blasting this much. And I think there is a lot of people that I think do like just don't kind of have that sense.
Yeah.
And I think that's where things can get scary. So
they're a little bit delusional and have a false sense of reality. And I think our jobs, like as coaches, is when you're assessing a situation, you need to think a little bit more, like really get to know that person and start to think about what that person might want 5, 10, 15 years down the road. I had a recent client, really good classic physique pro. He's been with me quite some time, has an amazing relationship, amazing wife. And I know that they'll make great parents. And I said that to him, and I asked him about fertility years ago. And he was like, yeah, like kids definitely like, you know, are something I want to be on the table and potentially have them later on. But I told him, I said, listen, like you could still bodybuild at a very high level, go to the Olympia, do everything. It's just, you got to take certain precautionaries periodically, which in his case, like when he wasn't sure about when he wanted to have them, ultimately just like re-stimulating the gonads like periodically.
Yeah.
And sometimes like
cycling HCG, would that be okay?
Exactly. Yeah. And then when you're in a place, like say, like when he was like, all right, like we're really want to try to conceive a child, that's when I would put him on more of a fertility based like recomp, where you're not only now focusing on re-stimulating the hypothalamus pituitary, like the signaling, your LH and FSH, but now you're starting to take a deeper dive and look at more of like the motility and progression of the sperm, which for bodybuilders, and this is where I kind of disagree with a lot of fertility clinics. They look a lot at like your overall like sperm concentrate. My whole perspective on that is like, you need one healthy swimmer. You know, what does it matter if you have 50 million that do not have the proper health to say, you know, fertilize an egg? So you want to really focus on, you know, the
quality as well. Right.
Exactly.
So like that's where HMG would probably fall.
HMG falls more in that, like the exogenous FSH, yes, or gonophyl F, yes, but it actually falls a little bit more on like different types of antioxidants. Glutathione is one of them. I had another guy that's a close friend of mine. He hasn't competed in like 10 years.
Yeah.
But they're trying to have kids. And at first he went to a fertility clinic and spent all this ridiculous money. And when I sat down and again, like assessed all the variables at hand, dude, it was as simple as him, one, like removing all the energy drinks that he was drinking every day. And also like working on just having better sleep hygiene. Yeah. And within like 30 to 45 days of doing that, boom.
Dude, this is why I always press just how important like risk mitigation and maximizing like longevity or health protocols is because like, you know, we all get our blood work done, but in the end, we don't have like an exact quantitative number to measure total, like just total stress on the body.
Of course.
Or total athletic load. And
our ranges are going to be different.
Right.
When you look at reference ranges on blood work, those are reference ranges too for a 65-year-old man that is barely active, you know? So like it's totally different. You need to be able to kind of break that down in pretty much all aspects, like with blood work, even when you go for an echocardiogram. I saw someone the other day that posted this. I can't remember who it was, but he went to a regular cardiologist and they literally freaked him out. Like made him feel like you're going to have a heart attack and have 2 years to live because he had slight left ventricle hypertrophy, which anybody that is an elite level athlete that's doing hypertrophy training, even triathlon runners, and then forget about it. Like your strongman powerlifting, you are going to have a
slight enlargement
of left ventricle You're going to. There's different thresholds of it. So like somebody that's been an athlete their whole life, a larger individual, ultimately, like if their left ventricle isn't bigger than like 1.3 like centimeters, that's relatively like normal. But if you went to like a regular cardiologist that wasn't seeing your elite level like athletes, they'll freak you out and make you think that you have some serious cardiovascular issue. Yeah.
Okay. So what are some of the top, if you had to rank things, what would be I kind of want to stress you a little bit. I was going to say 5, but what would be your top 10 things for someone to take supplementally or pharmaceutically to optimize the total amount of oxidative stress on their body and just their long-term health?
So remember too, it also is very contingent on the environment. So like if you had to just pick like your top 3 to 5, obviously like essential fatty acids, but particularly ones that are rich in DHA, EPA, essential fatty acids, a methylated vitamin B complex. Another huge problem you
don't think the methylated vitamin B complex is only more important for those that have the MTHF You know, the motherfucker gene?
No, it's important pretty much for everybody, but more so important for people that do have the MTHFR gene mutation with methylfolate, though. You'd want to take both of them. The number one biggest issue in like everyday, like in the United States, is the lack of fiber in people's diets, of types of soluble and insoluble fiber. Bodybuilders in like our off season, usually we're getting all of those in, but when we're in prep, that's usually why you'll see people that are constipated, because they're lacking the essential types of fiber. So those are definitely three. People too, especially that don't get enough sunlight, vitamin D3. I also like glutathione is also obviously very, very important. But I would base this more based upon like the individual. But most of the time, like most serious health issues are caused from just one of three things. One is insulin resistance and elevated like blood glucose. That's like the number one. Two is walking around extended periods of time of high blood pressure. And the third one is systemic inflammation. And two out of the three things I just named, you can literally monitor at home with like a $40 monitor or less. It's when people let things exacerbate where the issues become a little more complex.
Yeah.
You know,
just did those two things this morning. I'm very proud of myself, by the way. It's like 124 over 76. Yeah. Which is still in the higher end, you know, it could be a little bit lower. And then my blood glucose was 80 this morning, which I was actually kind of surprised. I thought it would be a little higher.
Yeah. And I mean, remember though, because like I tell people too, one, like it's normal probably like every 7 or 8 days for you to be having like a slightly higher like reading, which there's so many things that could throw that off, whether it's dehydration, you didn't get, good sleep, or you're having a little bit of stress, plus like the blood glucose monitors. It's so crazy that how inaccurate that they can be, that they're legally allowed to sell them if they're within like 15 to 20 points.
Oh, damn.
Yeah. That's why if you have more than one monitor, people text me all the time. They're like, look at this. Like this one says I'm 110. The other one says I'm 85. So,
that's crazy, dude.
I know.
Wait. Real quick, guys. So while I was looking at the YouTube analytics, I actually saw that 85% of you guys that watch this channel are not subscribed. And I want to ask very little of you guys, but if you enjoy this podcast, if you find value in it, then please do me this one favor and subscribe to the channel, because doing so helps me get bigger and greater guests like the guests you are listening to today. Also, this channel is not sponsored, which means only the companies that I work with, which are Young LA and Huge Supplements, are the companies that can help fund this channel by you guys using the code NILE. So code NILE gives you a discount of 15% off of Young LA, and code NILE also gives you a discount of 10% off of Huge Supplements. And if you decide to purchase anything from any of these companies, it will help immensely for me by using my code. And this way, I can travel to other guests and also upgrade an equipment to make this podcast bigger and better for you guys. Then what do you recommend to attack that problem? Because I mean, that's massive.
What's honestly the best to do is look at, obviously, like when you go for blood work, check your fasting insulin, because your A1C and even your blood sugar can't really be indicative of insulin resistance, because you could have an A1C, let's say that's technically 5.5, and that's technically in the reference range. But if your insulin is, north of 15 or 20, you're insulin resistant for sure. So you want to look at those ratios. And if you're like really monitoring it like closely, do a fructosamine test. That's an A1C, but A1C is more on 90 days. I think fructosamine is 2 weeks.
Okay.
And now it's nice that they do have, you could order them right on Amazon. You could order them right on Amazon, like the same way you would check your blood sugar at home. You can check those two from home too.
Okay. Cool. I really like asking people that general question, especially people that are a little bit more focused on health. Like I asked Dr. Dean the top 5, or maybe it was top 3 supplements, and his was glutathione. first, of course. So like injectable, and then maybe liposomal next, and then CoQ10, and then I think vitamin E was his top 3. So
yeah, but same thing back to like similar. Even like glutathione, it's great. But if you have issues with your bile ducts, like these different supplements work usually synergistically. Like you would want to take, if you're using glutathione, you would typically want to take that with TUDCA or UDCA. If you have issues with like hepatic insulin resistance and you have visceral fat or fatty liver, you would want to hit that with high amounts of 2 different forms of choline, in addition to TUDCA. And that will actually, for some people, it actually helps bring their waistline down. People that do have hepatic insulin resistance.
Does it matter the type of choline, or is things like inositol and choline and inositol more optimal for that type of case?
CDP choline and the yes, it's those 2 forms, about 1.5 grams a day of each of them.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's what I was thinking. Yeah, I was taking inositol, choline and inositol for a while for my liver because I had that. I've talked about this story. The whole issue where I was taking orals before I ever took actual like tests or anything. You told
me about that.
Yeah, it was crazy, man. And it was for like at least a year.
Yeah.
And my liver enzymes were in the 400s. And then doctors thought that I might have like chromatosis. I don't remember what it was. It's probably in my phone somewhere, likely, but I don't remember what it was. But yeah, I mean, everything turned out great. I just did a lot of glutathione, did a lot of TUDCA over the years, and then also did a lot of like inositol and choline and just everything I could to basically bring it down. And it just went back down. The interesting thing though is like, I wish I got it checked before I started all those orals. Obviously, I had no clue what really like was even on Broderick at the time.
Yeah.
Because now I don't know what my liver enzymes were before I ever did that. And my liver enzymes are always like in the 50s, which is like just barely right above the reference range, like 40 to 44. So it's like what's going on here? Because like no matter what I take TUDCA every single day, etc., they're always around there. So I'm like, liver's supposed to be the most
it can regenerate itself.
Yeah, right.
It's one of the only organs.
So maybe is that just like a normal baseline? Like was mine always just like that from the start, and the number doesn't matter? You
as an athlete, someone that's training, I mean, you're not taking off 2 weeks from the gym and eating. You're always, if your ALT and AST are slightly elevated, it's really not that much to worry about. You want to look more at your GGT, but let's say if you have like perfect GGT and your ALT and AST are always higher than 50, like let's say if they were anywhere between like 180, that's usually a sign of hepatic insulin resistance. And then from there, I would start looking a little further. I would look at like the home IR test, or just, that's the same thing as pretty much checking the ratios of your insulin and blood glucose and A1C. And then from, if you really want to, which I have had a bunch of people go do this, do a ultrasound of your liver, and you could actually see if there's visceral fat on it. Okay, cool. Yeah. All right. Yeah. My GGT has been great for a long time. So I'm glad that we use that as an example. Yeah. Yeah, I would totally agree with you too. Like I kind of expected you to say that it would depend on the client or the person that we're talking about when it comes to like the next 5 supplements that you'd probably do for your health. Cause obviously it's like, all right, like does this guy just have blood pressure? Is that one of the biggest issues? Like then what kind of interventions can we, implement for blood pressure? Like, I don't know, Tomasarin or some other options. Yeah. That's something like in the toolbox as like last resort. Or like, or if you're going into a certain phase that that this person is a little more predisposed to hypertension, then you can definitely use something like that. And it is much better that you would take certain preventative measures than walking around with, that's when people get themselves in trouble. When you're not going to have issues like, if you have a day that your blood pressure is high or your blood sugar is high. No, it's when people are walking around with either extreme high levels of blood glucose or high blood pressure, and they're unaware of it. And then what ends up happening is that becomes that person's norm, and they adapt to it. Because like for me, or probably you can probably feel when your blood pressure's high. Like I know that I get like a blood pressure headache, but when people are constantly that's kind of their new norm, they adapt to it and they're unaware of it. And that's where you run into issues. And the main issue, which I'm shocked I never hear more people talk about this. I don't post that much, but like the main thing that really causes everything is when you deteriorate the endothelium. And the endothelium is pretty much a protective coating that wraps around all of your cardiovascular tissue. And a good analogy, the doctor I work with was like, wow, that was actually a good way to describe it in layman's terms, would be like if you took a nonstick frying pan, like the Teflon on it, the coating that's on that is like what your endothelium is. And there's only a couple of things that can penetrate that wall. The number one is high blood glucose. That's why anyone with an A1C from 6.0 or up, I believe the numbers are 90% higher chance to get cardiovascular disease because it's destroying that endothelium. When that gets damaged, plaques, they stick to it like Velcro when that gets destroyed. Right. But this doesn't get destroyed overnight over a stressful day of you having high blood pressure or high blood. This is people that are walking around with it for years unaware. Yeah. You know?
Right. And then the second part of that equation too would be like LDL particles being shuttled through the bloodstream through oxidative stress, right? And then those start building up plaque buildup.
I wouldn't even consider that in the top 2 or 3. I would say too, if you want to go down like with like lipids, your lipoprotein B is more of the marker that you would want to assess. Lipoprotein A, that's more of a hereditary marker where if that comes back high and flagged, that's usually always going to be high. And that's usually something that's more hereditary based. But you would want to look at more your lipoprotein B and also your ratios to LDL to HDL. It's not the end of the world. Like if your LDL was a little high, but your HDL was good because your good cholesterol is helping remove the bad, and good cholesterol works as like an anti-inflammatory. It becomes a problem though when someone's HDL is completely in the tank
and then their LDL is sky high.
And they're like, exactly. That's when it becomes more of a problem.
What about ApoB?
Yeah, that's the most important one out of the lipids. Yeah.
So what are your thoughts on that? Because ApoB isn't ApoB primarily genetic?
No, ApoA.
ApoA is primarily genetic.
Is genetic, yes.
So ApoB.
Yes.
Then
that's pretty much the bad type of LDL that you don't want. That could cause a cardiovascular issue. Where ApoA, that's more, to my understanding, I'm like 98% positive, that's more of a genetic marker that you would see, in that typically, like if someone has that, it's usually something that runs in their family. That's more of a hereditary marker, where ApoB, that's something that you can definitely work on bringing that down. And that is, in my opinion, the most important when you're assessing like lipid profiles.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
But
and also using to like, I had someone, this is why people shouldn't use like ChatGPT and these fucking, excuse my language, some of these like AI apps. I had someone, he's not even a competitor. He's like in his 60s. He had a, I don't know if it was a calcium score or an angiogram. So he plugged it into one of these things and it told him like he needs to go on a statin, all these different things. But meanwhile, why he had like a blockage is because of like the diabetes and pre-diabetes, which statins, their mechanism of action is in the liver. So it actually can exacerbate like insulin resistance. And I can't remember the numbers on it, but there are some people that can develop type 2 diabetes from a statin. So in this guy's case, he would have been better off doing something like Repatha, things like that. But that's why you want to be careful, like using some of the AI's softwares like a ChatGPT to ask it medical advice.
Gotcha. Haven't you seen in your clients though, people that have like a good HDL to LDL ratio, like say that both are in range, but their ApoB is still sky high? or still high at least?
Like sometimes, 90, you know? But typically you would see one of the other ones off too. But sometimes I do, and I'll tell them the apoprotein B is the most important. But it wouldn't be as bad though if the HDL was at least good.
Okay,
you know.
So I'll always tell people about like my information, what's going on with me, just because I think it helps relate to the audience, and people that are in the same space can at least hear some advice that correlates to them. For me, for example, my HDL and LDL, I can keep them in range pretty easily.
Even your HDL?
My HDL, yeah, because I take a fuck ton of fish oils, man. And then I'm sure the cardio and the apples and the fruits and everything.
And anything like that?
I'm not sure what else I take supplementally that helps with HDL. There's a lot of things I do to help reduce LDL, I'd say.
Mm-hmm.
But anyways.
And you also come off, like you take breaks.
And I also come off, right. But anyways, HDL and LDL ratio is always in range. And then also normally both are in range. Sometimes LDL can be a little bit high, but the ratio is normally like, I feel like I see 1.3 a lot when it comes to my ratio, for example.
That's great.
And my LP little a is like 20. It's like fucking great. It's really awesome. My ApoB, however, is always high. Always, no matter what.
What's high? Like over 100?
No, but like 90, 80 to 90. It's still high, you know? And like, I know more plates, more dates is like kind of neurotic when it comes to his, like, you have to be extremely healthy. But he and I were having a discussion a couple years back, for example, and he was like, yeah, I mean, okay, look, I'm not going to say that like you should totally listen to his opinion. Maybe you should like go to a doctor first and like look at all the variables first. But he was like, he scared me because he was just like, your ApoB should be like 30.
No.
Most optimally. If you want to make sure that you have no issues whatsoever, then you should have your ApoB like around.
But let me ask you this, like you're a professional bodybuilder. When are you checking these labs too? Like, are you talking about, are you in a health phase where you're in?
I checked them through all different kinds of like phases, I guess. So like during my health phase, right after prep, during the off season, like I'll take it like 4 to 5 times a year, I'd say.
And they probably have to be worse, like in your off season, maybe.
To be honest, they're all kind of pretty close to the same.
I mean,
like my numbers never really get that skewed, which I am happy about. Like it's kind of cool to like see the numbers like right after prep looking really great, you know, shit like that. But I would say you're right though. In the off season phase, there's certain markers that certain markers that get more skewed towards the end of the off season for sure.
Yeah.
And then obviously all the things that you would expect, such as like blood pressure, LDL, hematocrit, and all these things that, you know, I am still like, you know, hematocrit? Like my doctor, for example, even though I get a little bit scared sometimes, he's like, do the phlebotomy before it reaches 55. You don't have to do it at 51, you know, shit like that.
Yeah. So my take on that, and I'll tell you, like when I first like graduated college and I started competing in the NPC, I was one of those people that would go, I would dump blood all the time, like every 3 months. Mm-hmm. And then it wasn't until later on, till I had the opportunity to work alongside like some really like educated people in the medical field that started telling me, and I started realizing, because I was checking my blood all the time, I'm like, man, like after 23 days, it just skyrockets back up. And I had clients too. I had a guy that owned a chain of wellness clinics, and I had the ability to check a CBC panel like every 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, man, I actually feel like the rebound that he's getting from it is actually like worse. So there are some people that I do recommend that go dump blood, like certain females too, that like if they're not getting their menstrual cycle for a while, certain people that are pre-exposed to different cardiovascular issues. But ultimately, like the way this cardiologist broke it down, he said to me, he goes, if you were driving through Vail, Colorado, is there a sign outside of Vail that tells you you're at risk of blood clot or cardiovascular disease? No, there's not. But if you go and you stay at a high altitude, those markers are going to increase too as well. So it's not necessarily a major risk factor if they are slightly going up within reason. It's better to actually optimize them, like using high amounts of like nanokinase. Vitamin E is another one, a good essential fatty acid. There's some people after COVID, which I think that this is great and it's saved so many people's lives, is incorporating a low dose of Eliquis. It's a prescription anticoagulant, but it's not like your Coumadin or Warfarin that you bump a wall and your whole arm is black and blue. That works phenomenal to keep them in a very good place. For certain people though, that might have different cardiovascular issues, but like if you're just going to dump blood, you'll notice that after like 3 weeks, 3 or 4 weeks, you get kind of a pendulum effect from it where, it's better to try to optimize it utilizing like the things that we just discussed.
Okay, cool. What about going back to ApoB?
Okay. So what about it?
So, you were asking what my ApoB was, and then I was telling you like what More Plates, More Dates said, and then you were about to say something, and then we ended up going on a tangent.
That's nothing for you to like. He's saying that your ApoB has to be in the 30s.
He said, okay, so he said 2 things. I think I'm trying to remember the exact number. It's in my DM somewhere. I think for you to be good and reassured as a bodybuilder, like if it's like you should, I remember something like 40 or 60. And then he referred to, I think, Peter Attia discussing that if you really want to make sure that you just have like 0 risk for your entire life, you want it to be like in the 20s.
But that's also in conjunction with where are your other health markers? Like what is your insulin sensitivity? What is your C-reactive protein, your homocysteine, your systemic inflammation? All of that gets kind of worked into the equation where you can't just isolate saying, if someone doesn't have their apoprotein B at, 40 or below, they're going to be at double the risk of cardiovascular disease. You for sure can't say that by it being isolated by itself. There's so many other like factors that kind of play into that. That is the most important marker though, when it comes to lipids. Yes, for sure. But there's just so many other moving parts that go like along with it that you take into that equation.
Okay. So I guess,
there's steps that you should take with it.
So say that somebody has the same genetics as I do. So their numbers kind of fall in the same range. Like HDL LDL ratio always looks great. Both are in range. Uppy little age, genetic markers, fucking really good. And then their ApoB is just like 80 to 90. Like, would you have a recommendation for how they improve their ApoB marker?
What I would be interested to see is how the environment affects those fluctuations. If you do notice that, let's say in your off season, like when you're pushing it, let's say if it's increasing that marker by 25% or more, then you can maybe during that time frame introduce like a low dose of ezetimibe then, which in my opinion is far better than a statin during that time frame, just as a precautionary. But you got to remember, like, especially with blood work and everything that we do as coaches and even doctors, we're ultimately like, we're detectives. We're provided snippets of information, and that information tells you really what to do next. Okay, if you're consistently having certain markers that are skewed, okay, let's look at and see what, like everyone that's competing at a high level, they should have an echocardiogram done, or even better, a stress test every 2 years. Calcium score, I would say a little bit longer than that, because that's more of a long-term. And then like for a calcium score, if that did come back over a certain threshold, say if it was over 500, then you go for an angiogram. And then based off of those results, it tells you literally everything that you need to know and look out for it. It's the same thing too with bodybuilding. When you look at, when you were writing up like say a PED protocol for someone and you want it to be as effective as possible, and let's say you have someone that converts, estradiol super high, then this person might do better on DHTs.
Yeah.
Different things like that. But if you just pay attention to the small variables, it'll usually give you the answers that you're looking for.
Okay. I just wanted to ask you first before I told people my experience. My cardiologist, Dr. Lichtenstein in LA, he rest assured me that my ApoB number is just fine because my LPA is so small. And then we did the echo, and then we did a couple other tests. I didn't do an angiogram or.
Have you ever had a calcium score done?
We did the calcium score. Everything looks great. So basically,
that like you look at your echocardiogram, your ejection fraction, the extent of if you have any left ventricle hypertrophy.
Right.
You look at all of that, and like people just don't roll over usually randomly and just have a heart attack. Mm-hmm. There's warning signs leading up to that. There is. And it's when people kind of sweep them under the rug is when they get themselves in trouble. And the dangerous part about what we do in bodybuilding is the things that people are doing right now. Typically, they're not going to yield an acute, like serious health issue right now at this moment. They're usually going to down the road, unless it was like something that was like diuretic related. That's something obviously totally different. Uh-huh. But that's the thing that a lot of people don't understand, like what is going on a cellular level right now is potentially going to impact you later on down the road. And I see it literally every single day with what I do. Cause again, like I work with a lot of competitors. Yes. Mm-hmm. But I work with a lot of regular people too. And I can usually tell a guy that I had, this guy was almost a year ago, just came in. He didn't even set up a consult with me. It was his daughter. Cause he was like 68. She was able to log on to like his Quest portal and sent me like 8 years of his blood work. As soon as I got on the phone with him, I said, listen, tomorrow you need to go in and go have a calcium score test done. And I said, listen, you're probably going to need to go get an angiogram done and just be prepared. They're probably going to need to stent you. And he's like, what? He's like, I never even spoke. How do you know that? I'm like, because your doctor has allowed you to walk around as an undiagnosed pre and pretty much full-blown diabetic. Because I mean, his A1C over an 8 to 10 year time span was between, the lowest was like 5.8 to like a 7. And like undiagnosed, untreated, just left this guy. And the guy, to tell you the truth, looking at him, great shape, like was a carpenter his whole life, Italian guy. Lipids weren't even too bad. Within 3 weeks of that first phone consultation I did with him, his daughter called me and they're like, oh my God, like they're rushing him in to have triple bypass surgery right now. And he had 2 like major like blockages. And they didn't even stent him. They had triple bypass surgery. And I could just tell that from just looking at the blood work over the years.
Damn.
And to tell you the truth, it's such a shame. That doctor should be thrown in jail for seeing that and not doing anything about it. Because I told the daughter, I'm like, I'm letting you know, like this all could have been prevented. Even like if they would have put him on something like as simple as like put the guy on like metformin, whatever it may be, to make sure. Because what was happening when we were talking about the endothelium, walking around all those years, destroying that endothelium.
Right.
And then it exacerbates.
That's fucking shocking, because normally you see the opposite with doctors. Normally they're a little bit more on the overly cautious side. You know what I mean? Especially if you can see a trend line in your blood work, that's the most important. So I don't know. That's kind of surprising to me. Yeah,
no, I know. I mean, you could see 2 things in Western medicine here. It's so sad. Like there's another person too that everything is based around too, like your insurance. Like I have a guy that needs an angiogram. Like he's had a calcium score over 1200. So I told him to go to the hospital. I said, go to the hospital, complain you're having chest pains, show them the calcium score. They'll have to give you an angiogram. So they brought him in. They even did blood work and his troponin was flagged. Troponin is a inflammation marker that's isolated to the heart.
Yeah.
Usually if that's like over a certain, it can mean that you had a heart attack recently. That even came back flagged. So I spoke him and I'm like, great. He's like, they're prepping me for the angiogram. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. Finally, you're gonna get this done. He gives them his insurance card.
Oh no.
stop the angiogram. They give him a basic EKG, and I think they gave him a beta blocker and sent him home.
Oh,
and
shit.
I told him, I said to myself, I said to my fiance, Amanda, I'm like, if something happens to him, like that's all like medical negligence, that he should have been able to have that done. And the problem is that here you have to jump through a lot of loopholes to get certain types of treatment and tests done. Even with cancer is a very time-sensitive disease.
Yeah.
Well, if you're sitting there, you're waiting months and months and months. By that point, that can make or break someone like living in it being fatal.
Yeah, that's why I really want to get the Preemptive scan at least within the next 5 to 10 years.
They do them here. I could get, if you want to do anything right now on how young you are, do the Galleri test. When we're done,
all right,
I'll give you all the information for it. You can go right up. I mean, you can get the scan done too if you want to.
I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait a few years.
Does cancer run in your family?
Cancer does run in my family, but I mean, obviously, it's also. I don't know how much I can say like how much it really runs in my family, because a lot of these were very exacerbated by lifestyle. Like, for example, like liver and lung cancer from smoking and drinking and then he died in his 70s from cancer. Like,
yeah,
so, but it's there. So it's something that I still want to check at some point anyways. But I do know that there's a lot of doctors. There's doctors that are proponents of it, and there's doctors that are against it because they say that it flags a lot of markers that may be false, but you end up going down a hole of like getting testing done, and it could end up costing you a lot of money for things that actually were not really that important.
Yeah. So like the good thing about the Galleri test, if you do pop like positive, and not only that, like, 'cause I was like obviously intrigued about it when I first, they had a rep that came into the clinic. It tells you too, like what specific type of cancer, but I'm pretty sure they pay for a retest that you'll get tested right afterwards. So and God forbid if it was a false positive, but I'm almost positive it's got like a 98 to 99% like accuracy rating.
Okay.
So yeah. And if you did have one, they do a retest for you. And I'm pretty sure that they cover that for you. And then, if that's popped positive, then they would, send you to a specialist.
Honestly, we could list out a long list of all the peptides that have helped us. You guys have heard these peptides and these research chems in the podcast maybe a million times. Peptides I've used from APR such as BPC 157 and TP500 for soft tissue healing, Retatrutide and other GLPs, mitochondrial support such as SS31, MOTC, 5-amino-1Q, methylene blue, SLU. There's a bunch of others. Obviously, the list goes on and on. One of my favorite things, though, that I've been utilizing, such as during my last prep, that has allowed my blood work to come basically pristine, aside from slightly elevated liver enzymes at about 60 and 130 1 week after the show. And this is after a leg day because my dumbass doesn't want to skip a training day. These are probably the things that I think are the most important. So this includes like your injectable glutathione, injectable or even just normal NAC, liposoluble glutathione, GI aids such as oral BPC, oral TB, KPV. A lot of these things have probably been very substantial in reducing oxidative stress and keeping all my blood markers down, and thus keeping me as basically healthy as fucking possible that you can be while you're bodybuilding. So I couldn't be more thankful to Mike for literally showing me the ropes and also providing me with all of these things. Even the compounded supplements that he creates for blood pressure and reducing oxidative stress on all your organs, including your cardiovascular system, your liver and your kidneys. All of these that he creates have been very substantial, honestly. So you can find any of these at his site, aprhealthsolutions.com. And he has offered me a code Nile for you guys to use, which will offer you a 15% discount off of all of that as well. If you guys end up using those and you like him, please let me know. Shoot in a comment, just give me a DM or something. And if you ever have any problems or any questions, I'll be here too. This is a community for me. Even though I don't have a fucking Discord because I'm lazy as shit, but I fucking should make one. So love you guys and keep training hard.
You're with like a TRT clinic, aren't you?
Yeah. I'm with an HRT clinic, optimized HRT.
Because I was going to tell you, if you need any sort of medical test, functional health test, literally anything, I could order it for you.
Oh, thank you, bro.
So, I bought this for you too.
Oh, nice.
Such a little gift.
We're gonna keep this on the podcast.
Yeah.
Dom's giving me gifts.
My girl started making like these vintage shirts.
Oh, shit.
And then flip it around. It's got like the Supersliced logo.
Best built team. Fire, dude. That's awesome.
Yeah,
thanks, bro.
definitely. I'll bring you another one next time.
Hell yeah. I'm becoming super sliced, baby.
Yeah, no, it's cool.
The fucking scythe is sick.
The sickle, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Thank you,
no,
bro.
any sort of, which is like a huge plus for me and like my coaching team, that we have access now. We have provider access. So any sort of like blood work, functional health test, mold toxicity, GI maps, we could order them for anyone in the country. And it's good with coaching, especially like our coaching style. We're very like data driven, and it helps your body obviously respond when you know you're doing everything the right way. Like if you're in prep and you see just something is different with someone's body's response, like I can go and just order a selective like test. Like say if you just wanted to check your ApoB, we could check it for under $20. Like if you wanted to check that.
I see.
Or
that's cool.
Anything. Yeah.
That's cool. Okay.
So that's been like a big plus that I feel like creates a lot of value too for clients.
Okay.
You know, like I work with we work with a lot of females. So sometimes optimizing their hormones can be a little tricky, and having accessibility to different things like if you're using like an oral estradiol to an injectable. So it's nice to be able to have this, in our toolbox at our disposal. Yeah.
That's cool, man. The thing I like about my clinic, Optimize HRT, is that as an incentive to have people join the company, especially since it's new, they use their membership price to make quarterly bloods for the customers cheaper than it would have been otherwise. So like you're paying for this membership, but then the bloods are free.
But then it makes them go like quarterly.
Then it forces them essentially to go quarterly, which I also really
that's the way it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I really like the fact that you can get specific markers tested without having to take, fucking everything basic, especially if you already have that. So if anyone comes up, because I get a lot of DMs, especially since I've been better about responding to my DMs this year. If I get anyone, I'll send them your way for sure.
Yeah.
Because that's awesome.
Definitely. What was I going to say towards that too? I forgot what I was going to say, but no, I was going to say compared to the price point, compared to like, even like what Merrick, like, cause I compared like what they were charging for like one of their most like extensive panels. It's less than like, it's like 60% the price. It's like less than half the price.
That's awesome
too. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's what nobody wants to pay for is blood work for real. So that's nice.
Yeah, no. And you can get all the basic essentials checked for under, like all the essentials for under $200.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then if you want to go into more extensive testing, like I'll have people, I had actually 2 people last month that flew in from another country, just flew into the United States for 1 day, flew in, they sent me a list, and in my head, I wanted to tell them like, bro, like half these things you don't really even need to test, but hey, if you want to, like you can. They quoted him another place. They quoted him like $3,800. I mean,
what?
This guy was ordering everything, and I got everything done for him like for like under $1,200.
Damn. Okay.
But like 30% of it was useless. But I was like, okay, order it.
Damn, dude, that's a big ass order.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any proponents or no? Are there any proponents? Damn. Are there any, I had this comment recently and it fucking made me laugh, dude. It was like Niall brain farts every fucking 5 minutes. I have podcasts where I'll brain fart like a fuck ton, especially if it's something like that's like 10:30 at night or whatever. And then I'll have podcasts like this where I can fucking talk like fine. You know what I mean? It's just like, it just depends on just how much sleep I get that previous night. And I'm someone that just does not have good consistent. Well, I have, what is the word? I'm diagnosed for like certain types of insomnia, especially like psychological insomnia. And my dad has it. Like I've woken up in the middle of the night and seen my dad just on his phone because he's anticipating the flight we have the next day.
Yeah.
You know, and he just can't go to sleep. So that kind of dictates just my focus. So that was a tangent.
Oh, dude,
for y'all,
I'm the same way. I mean, I was diagnosed with like IEP as like a child. Like I'm just dyslexic. You can even tell sometimes like people that will read some of my messages.
Mm-hmm.
If I get really like frazzled and I'll catch myself, I'll actually write words backwards.
That's fucking sick.
That's when I know it's getting like really bad. And I feel like, cause I also have Lyme's disease, that exacerbates it. Like where when my Lyme's disease starts to get really bad and I start to have like a Lyme's flare up, I'll forget I'm talking about the most basic stuff, like from my phone number, my social security number.
It's weird. That's crazy.
I couldn't even one day remember how many calories were in a gram of fat. And that's like, for me, like your AB. But just saying like, I know when it's getting bad at different points, depending on like if my sleep was really compromised or if I'm having a really, really stressful work day.
Yeah. Yeah. Mine's obviously different. I have different conditions, but I've been diagnosed ADHD since I was in high school, and I had to take Adderall for so long, thing. Which definitely fucked up my personality while I was on it for sure. Like that was really weird, man. Like I don't know if everybody has this experience, but I turned fucking robotic and shit. It's like I couldn't even feel like emotions depending on like what was happening externally. It was weird. Anyways, that is always like super exacerbated by however my sleep hygiene was the previous night.
Of course.
So, which is interesting because like during school, I just could not focus at all. But now these days, I don't need Adderall at all. I've just been on top of my sleep, and on top of my nootropics, and on top of my brain health. And I feel like if I am and I get good sleep, then everything is perfect in my opinion. So it's interesting how like I think when you're younger, and especially back then, like people would just patch things up instead of looking at every single variable related to health. That's
ultimately you just described Western medicine in the United States.
Yeah.
We do pretty much retroactive care. I call it Band-Aid care. Instead of them looking at what is the root cause of the issue, they'll go ahead and put a Band-Aid on it just to treat the acute symptom, then addressing what's the root cause of the issue. Mm-hmm. They do that literally with everything.
Yeah. Okay. Well, since we were talking about Band-Aids, what about proactive preventative methods? Are there any peptides that you're incorporating right now?
So like with peptides, I want people to remember this. There are some, I have like my favorites that I feel like that are the most beneficial, like SS31, thymosin alpha 1. But you have to remember something. Most of these peptides too, there's no clinical data on like whatsoever. That they're in the earliest stages, which when you want to talk about like clinical data, there's 7 stages ultimately, right? In the very beginning, they usually are doing rodent studies, which is not really applicable so much to humans because we are totally different on every different level. Then like the fourth or fifth stage would be like the gold standard, your random control trials. But like something like SLU, that's still around, I believe, around the stage like 1 or 2. And my whole thing is we're ultimately then, if you're running things for longer periods of time, you're turning yourself ultimately into a guinea pig. Because anything that is really like speeding up like the mitochondrial like signaling, you can potentially have even like higher like risk factors. Now, don't get me wrong. Anything is bad if you're doing anything in excess. Nothing is bad if you're doing it in moderation for short periods of time. But like anything else in bodybuilding, you're taking, calculated risks. And, there's only certain peptides, like you have your growth hormone mimicking peptides, which there are benefits to them. But if you break down the risk to reward with them, just take exogenous growth hormone. Like doing a growth hormone mimicking peptide compared to doing like exogenous growth hormone is like trying to put an octane booster in jet fuel. Mm-hmm. Like why would you go ahead and some of these like growth hormone mimicking peptides, you can get growth hormone for the same price. So, you know, if you have someone maybe that has like a sponsor that gets them for a good price or whatever, then you could implement them. But typically the ones that I like to use, like SS31, I love using that more so in like a recomposition phase. I'll use that. I love thymosin alpha-1 for especially like people that have autoimmune conditions. Definitely a total game changer.
Yeah. Right.
You know, like things like SLU, there are some scenarios where I would use it. Like if someone's been on a GLP for a long period of time, I'll do some things like where it's called like a bridge phase where, you know, you're getting someone off a GLP where you could use like GAG peptide with SLU to kind of combat like the metabolic benefits that you're getting from the SLU while you're tapering them off. Yes, they could be used, you know, beneficial, but I would just be very, very careful right now using these things in high doses for long duration. And it's like anything else. The poison is in the dose and the duration with anything.
Yeah. Conversation I had with Kubichelin, I think he was saying that ejection fraction and something else was extremely high for one of his clients. Didn't change any of the dosages.
And high SS31 did bring it down.
Implemented SS31 and SLU, but not like high dosages. Like, cause I was like, doesn't SLU sometimes like couldn't that like increase blood pressure potentially in some people? And he's like, the poison is in the dose.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you
it is.
said.
But the SS31, if you're doing it for something like that, you can run that at a very high dose.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What would you say is high?
5 milligrams a day.
Oh, that's high?
I mean, saying that would be towards the higher threshold.
Okay.
Towards there. Starting at the higher threshold would be at 5 and then up to, you know, there's people that run up to 10 or 15 milligrams a day. Okay.
I'm glad that I asked you because you look on the internet and there's not very good information on dosing for SS31. And you see some protocols that are like 5 milligrams and like 10 milligrams. And you see some things that are based on your weight, but then those get you some fucking random numbers. It's pretty weird.
Well, SS31 made it to the last final stages of clinical trials. Don't quote me on this, but on 2022, the main thing is the finances to be able to do this. It made it to its last stage. And I think the company that was doing it, something happened where they went under, but there is a lot of clinical human trials done on SS31. Definitely. Same thing with methylene blue, but same thing like methylene blue in very high doses. You can run into serious issues with that. I know with like your serotonin and the same thing with your mitochondria.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of SS31, honestly. One of the things that's like, I think a lot less of an important reason for use though, but that I really enjoyed is Mike from APR Health Solutions. Like I get this from both APR and from Optimize, but he has a protocol where you can implement SS31 before your workout and it decreases the rest time between sets for you that's required.
Because of the ATP, I'm imagining that's probably why.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's more, I don't know if there's any clinical data that would show that type of environment, but it definitely makes sense as a staple in like a recomposition phase. Oh, the other one I forgot.
Yeah, if you don't mind me asking though, why SS31 particularly in a recomposition phase?
Because SS31 it's not changing your mitochondria. It's pretty much, think of it as like cleaning your mitochondria out to be able to, you know, signal better for all those benefits, opposed to like SLU, things like that. When you're running them in high doses, that could actually create more oxidative stress where you're doing almost like the reverse. But I forgot to even name the holy grail out of all the peptides that I use with like what I consider like the ultimate, like for like repairing mucosal lining, gut lining would be like oral BPC, KVP, and TB500. Yeah. That is like a gold standard when you're dealing with cases like, that have really bad, like leaky gut, mucosal lining. That one's definitely a game changer.
I'd have to say that I'm a pretty good case for that. Because I get gut issues pretty easily, and implementing those, and then also just some sauerkraut, and sometimes some kombucha, bro. I feel like those are all that I really needed to like change my gut health
Absolutely.
immensely.
And if you've never done a GI map and you've been competing for some time, definitely do one, because I've had, even this year alone, a bunch of like elite level competitors that looking at things on paper where they weren't making progress for years. And to find out that like 2 years ago, they had really, really bad, like deteriorated, like super low acromantia, really, really bad leaky gut. Zonulin was terrible, which is really a marker to assess like leaky gut. Their bodies weren't breaking down short chain fatty acids, which for a bodybuilder, it's crucial. But it's very, very common that you see that, because what happens is when people are in prep, they end up having issues with stomach acid in their body not being able to break down protein, short chain fatty acids. And then it ends up deteriorating like the gut lining. And then in your off season, when people are pushing like an abundance of food, that's where you're like more opened up to having like different types of like overgrowths, things like that. But the gut, words can't describe like how important that is, that you're keeping that in, an optimal place. And bodybuilders are more susceptible to having issues than anyone. So I think another topic to talk about too, like more like transitioning more into the bodybuilding space, like even like insulin, like coaching, because I got into like this little bit of a debate.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask you about a few of that. Now that you say that, how much insulin do you feel like you actually need in order for you to affect your long-term hypertrophy, rather than just giving your pancreas a break? Because I remember you mentioning this before.
So like if you're using it more so for like hypertrophy, building muscle, the time's really like, in my opinion, is going to be more like post-workout. You want to shuttle all that nutrients and the cell after you're done training, restore, muscle, liver glycogen.
Do you basically feel like that like the postprandial, or no, not the post, like the massive increase in glucose uptake just from post training is not enough?
Say that again.
The increase in glucose uptake post training is not enough. Like, do you think that like adding insulin post training really makes that much of a difference? So
the way that I like to do it, like, all right, like pre-workout, the only times that I would usually recommend that would typically be like if you're about to have a big pre-workout meal and your blood sugar was over 100, then it's beneficial to do that, because if you're running high blood glucose, majority of the nutrients isn't getting partitioned into the muscle cell. And the other thing with pre-workout that you got to be mindful of, that's hard to gauge, is also like you're training hard, you're utilizing glucose. So you have a higher likelihood of also going like hypoglycemic. And then, the flip side is like, then you could just take in more carbs like while you're training. But then you like roll into risks of like having gastric dumping, things like that, where that window is really important. Like after you're done training, the way that I like to set it up would be after you're done training and like in the middle of your training, sipping on some branched chain cluster dextrin carbs in the middle of the training. After you're done, let's say you have a post-workout shake that has, 45 to 50 grams of protein, 100 grams of carbs. You would hit short-acting insulin, say, whatever, 15, 20 minutes before that post-workout shake. If you time it right, you go ahead, you have that post-workout shake. Like if it's short-acting insulin, it should peak twice. Peaks the first time during that post-workout shake, and then it should peak again about an hour later. And when I say peak, meaning it's driving your blood glucose down. Yeah. That's going to be the most optimal time to take in that, say, that post-workout meal after the post-workout shake.
Okay.
And that's a common question that people get all the time. Like, when should I have my post-workout meal? Like, I'll write like a rough time frame, but the actual answer to that question is really however long it takes for your blood glucose to drive back down. And obviously, if you're using an exogenous insulin, you might have to wait 2 hours after your that post-workout shake for your blood glucose to go back down. Opposed to if you do a little bit of exogenous insulin, probably, within an hour later, you'll be ready to hit that post-workout meal.
Okay. I got you. I see. What was the debate that you had regarding insulin?
So there's a top coach, one of the top female coaches in the IFBB, has won multiple Olympia titles, goes on that beyond that main Instagram page that does like coverage, and has a clip, and he's like, and I can't believe this, like there are women that are using insulin. Meanwhile, I've looked at this guy's some of his programming, and listen, I'll never ever judge a coach ever unless like I have seen like a lot of their like programming to be able to base my opinion on it. And I've seen this guy's plans, and this guy has no problem like nuking a female's estrogen for 12 to 16 weeks on Novadex or Rimidex, having them run like high 19 NOR drugs. And then he goes ahead and says, I can't believe like the direction this is going in, that there are girls using insulin. Meanwhile, like structurally on paper, insulin is probably one of the safest things for a female to use. Cause again, like it's not androgenic. They're not going to have any sort of masculine side effects from it.
Right.
It's not like shifting their endocrine system, like what they're doing when they're using, you know, all these other PEDs and, you know, AIs and SERMs. But it just goes to show you that there's a lot of that have absolutely no clue what they're doing or what any of these accessories actually are doing.
Yeah.
Because if it's used the right way, it's actually one of the safest things that can be done.
Yeah.
It gets a bad reputation because you'll have people
that go to the 80 mark instead of the 8 mark.
Exactly. And that can happen a lot. Like I've seen people, and like for me and you, we would just think it's common sense, like 8 units means, but some people take that as like 80. And that's where you can run into obviously some issues.
Right. Yeah.
But when it's done the right way, it could be used highly effectively, and it could actually be more of a preventative thing when people are taking, you know, high amounts of GH and food, that if it's utilized the right way.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. Man, crushing women's estrogen, that's fucking wild. I already have a hard time dealing with them when they're on their period and their progesterone and estrogen's dropping. I can't imagine crushing that.
It's the number one issue in the female competitive space. And I tell people like people can compete, but for a female, if they want to compete and do it the right way, where they're prioritizing their health, their femininity, if they're doing that, there's a lot of moving parts. And I tell people like, this is an expensive sport to do it the right way. Yeah, of course you can put muscle on and do it, you know, as cheap as possible, but you're not prioritizing certain aspects. And to do that, you have to look at a lot of different things. Like a lot of my females, I take a lot of pride in this, that compete at a high level in women's physique, women's bodybuilding. They still look like females and they look like their age, where I can show you other girls that are at the same level that are in their 20s. And I'll tell you, like this athlete, one of my athletes, they're old enough to be for that to be their child, and they look the same age. It's because they're prepping themselves just as they would if they were a male. And it's completely, totally different ball game.
Gotcha. Okay. We only have a certain amount of time, so I'm like, I don't want to go on too many tangents, but like when it comes to especially like issues with women, there's just so much that I want to talk about on this podcast, and I just don't know anything about. One of the things, for example, is like one of our close friends passed away from a blood clot, and she was on birth control. And it's like, dude, how many women are on birth control? There's so many. How are you supposed to reduce that risk or save yourself from that? Most people don't even know about that, you know?
Well, there's different types of birth control too. So there's, I don't know why I'm having a brain fart. It's generation 1 or 2s. Essentially there's 2 different types of birth control that for women that are going to compete, that say if they were using birth control, that would be more of an optimal. That's what they should be using would be, I'm pretty sure it's either generation 1 or 2 types of birth control. Plus 2 with your friend too, that you said that had a blood clot. I don't know if like there was any family history of like any other issues, like did she recently have like the V word, like if she was vaccinated recently or had COVID or had any other type of, systemic inflammation or anything else that was going on. So those are the things that I would, that I would look at with that.
I believe the answer to that last thing is no. She did break her foot and was in a cast from hiking.
Oh, dude, like I will guarantee you that played more of that was what caused the blood clot more than the birth control. Likely.
It's both. No, because it's like how does one just like how do you just break an arm and then you get a blood clot and die?
She's a competitor.
And pass away.
She wasn't a competitor. So like whoever was like her medical provider at the time, they should have been looking at these things to see if she did potentially could have like a blood clot. Again, like if she was on something like an Eliquis, that's something that could have potentially prevented that from happening. But it's just literally a matter of, it's the same thing with like coaching athletes. It's a matter of like paying attention to everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's why I was saying too, like with like me and my team, I set my client cap at a very specific number. And I've even was okay with increasing my rates. And if I asked any of my clients, I'm like, look, would you rather pay an extra $40 or $50 a month or have me have a set period of time of only 15 minutes to look at your check-in a day because I have 300 check-ins to go through, where I set my client cap at a certain number, like around 115 or 120, which even at that number, I'm still working 6 days a week, 10 to 12 hour days. And then my two coaches, if anyone's working with them, it's the same thing as like working with me. They're brought up under the same like education system. I meet with them each like twice a week. And it's to keep that client cap where you're able to monitor everything very closely. And that ultimately is probably more than 50 to 60% of being a good coach. And same thing with a doctor. You could go to someone on paper that's the most prestigious doctor in the world. But if you get the impression that you're being rushed, you're not having things explained to you, that's a major red flag that you might be better off going to someone that on paper doesn't have as many credentials, but somebody that actually just gives a shit to do their diligence to monitor everything.
Okay, that's good to know. I have something that I kind of wanted to debate with you a little bit. So I had Broderick Chavez on the podcast, and we were discussing, he likes to call cycles courses because he's very...
I've actually had two clients that previously like worked with him, and some of his PED programming, I definitely see the logic behind it for sure, which I've had some coaches too, where I try to give everyone the benefit of the doubt and look at it like, okay, like try to make sense of it, like where they're seeing it from, where there's tons of people where I'm just like, this person's just throwing shit against the wall.
Yeah.
But his logic pretty much like from what I saw was the same things that I say, like the dose is, the poison is in the duration and the dose.
Yeah.
From the two plans I looked at least.
Okay.
Because of all the drama of the last company that I was working with, and I'm not trying to point any fingers or anything, but you guys definitely have probably heard what was going on. I've been a little bit skeptical, to be honest, and I've been wanting to find an HRT company that I could work with and that I could get my blood work done with, and that would offer me some proper guidance without upcharging all of my homies and shit. So there's this kind of crazy opportunity that I feel like the universe has granted, because it's not something that I searched for necessarily, but ended up being through connections with my closest friends. And it's this new company I was working with, Optimize HRT, which Nathan was recently discussing. And I just gotta say, man, I'm really proud of everything that they've created and everything that they're standing for. They're trying to take advantage of the fact that they know what went wrong with the last HRT company and trying to make sure that that doesn't happen this time, if you know what I'm saying, and doing things the right way. So this company is where I am getting my blood work done from, and basically getting all my health measures and protocols for longevity checked. And basically the difference between an HRT clinic and a research chem gray market source is that the HRT clinic works with a 5083 compounding pharmacy. You can get all your peptides and your medications prescribed by the doctor. if you're not getting a hormonal peptide or medication such as testosterone, nandrolone, Winstrol, or Anavar, which you can get prescribed to yourself if the need is shown, such as like osteoporosis or some other muscle wasting disease, then luckily you can get the peptides prescribed to you without having to get blood work done. But they do offer at a $100 membership that includes free blood work, which is normally a $420 panel every 3 months. And with the membership, you also get a wellness specialist that is like your peptide coach that will, with the doctor, give you the best peptide protocol or medication protocol to make sure you reach your goals. And these are goals such as fertility goals, cutting down and getting fucking jacked, composition goals, longevity goals, basically everything that you can imagine that is fucking sick for dudes. The other great thing, aside from getting everything prescribed, which obviously you can show your destinations if you're traveling, your prescriptions, so you're not getting thrown into jail in Tokyo or some shit. It is sent with cooling, needles, and instructions, which is actually illegal for research chem science. And in terms of safety and quality, Optimized HRT does work with a 503A compounding pharmacy, in which the FDA checks for its inflow and outflow currents to make sure that there are no vortexes that cause contamination, which yields the highest threshold of safety, basically. So this is on an opinion by opinion basis. Like, if you decide that you want to go the cheaper route, then normally gray market sources that are research chem sites will normally offer these for cheaper. Since the company is still new, they are offering their peptides at the lowest cost that they can in respective to other HRT companies, because they are trying to get their member base up. So if you are wanting to join an HRT clinic, now is probably the time. And that link is going to be in the description if you guys are interested. You could also use code NILE whenever you apply, because that helps your boy out and gives me a little reference and gives me some creds. So they know I'm sick and that people actually like the podcast, which would be pretty awesome. Since I am helping with the start of this company, I want to make sure that this is the best company that could possibly give us the best experience. So if you guys happen to have any questions or any concerns, bring this shit up with me, man, because I want to make sure that we all grow this to be the best that we can, and we all grow together, obviously, because otherwise my podcast is shit and everything that I've like worked for is like fucking pointless. So that's what it's all about, bro. Is family and brotherhood and us getting fucking yoked.
I know this might be a lot to answer, but if you could kind of summarize and ideally how long you would run an off season for, and how long you might run a typical off season cycle for one of your for a client.
And
say that they're a pro
client, like open bodybuilder, female, male,
classic. I feel like classic is always like a good middle ground.
So first thing is like to establish a baseline. Usually they would come out of a recomp where we would get labs done at the end of it so we could establish a baseline to make sure everything is in. Like, go ahead.
Can you, what is a recomp for you?
A recomp would be like where we're optimizing everything to set up the next phase.
So optimizing everything as in like what, health markers?
Health markers, insulin sensitivity, metabolic markers, setting them up in every aspect you could imagine. Central nervous system training. Like if somebody, like sometimes I might have to cut someone's off season short. I just had to 4 weeks short because he's got a really bad ACL issue. So he can't push in the gym. So what's the point of pushing this, staying on certain PEDs when you can't maximize them? So after they're in that recomp, we get labs done, make sure that we're in the most optimal place to start hitting the gas. And what I mean by that, I mean that everything is in the best place, like in terms of your central nervous system, health markers, insulin sensitivity, all the important variables that are going to move the needle to put on as much tissue. Then from there, usually I have certain types of information on that individual to have a good idea of like what PEDs to start them off on. Like, let's say if it was someone in classic that we started off the off season and we went with something basic like a testosterone as a base and as a DHT derivative, went with Primo and maybe front loaded it with Anavar for the first 4 weeks and then like a low dose of HGH. And then typically the off-season phase could last anything. And again, remember, it depends on also what PEDs I had them on. In my opinion, if someone's going to run something like equipoise, it's kind of pointless to run that anything shorter than 12 to 14 weeks. because before it like truly climaxes in the bloodstream, it's better to stay on that if you're going to do it for a longer period of time, unless you were running something like DHB with it, which is great. But yeah, like say if you were going with Primo, Anavar to front load the cycle after the, and you remove the Anavar after some time. And then usually I start walking the doses up, like with the injectables after some time, like say after you remove the Anavar after week 5, and say you were running, let's just say, and again, it depends on the individual. If it's somebody that aromatizes a little more easily, I would maybe run the DHT higher than somebody else. But let's just say we have someone that was running, starting off at say 450 or 500 tests, 350 Primo. After the Anavar is removed, say you go up on the test to 600 or 625, but you would go up each week by 50 milligrams more on each injectable once you remove the Anavar till you'll hit that ceiling. And then it really is based upon
what can you give an average ceiling? Like hypothetically in this kind of scenario.
So like, again, like say if somebody started off at they were like 450 or 500 milligrams a test, 350 Primo, and front loaded it with Anavar in the workout days for the first 4 weeks. After the first 4 weeks or so, then start slowly walking the dose of the injectables up. Let's say we increased it by a total of say 25%, where the Primo went from 350 to 450 and the test went to 600 or 650. But at week 4, they would slowly start going up, let's say by 50 milligrams more each week until they hit that. And then ultimately, if they're responding well and they're meeting the progression expectations, which usually I'll look at someone and I'll be like, okay, our goal, let's say this off season, is to put on, let's say 5 pounds of tissue over, 3.5 months or whatever it may be. If the person was gaining, let's say 4.5 pounds a month or 5 pounds a month, you figure, 40 to 50% of that is, water, a little bit of body fat. And, the other half of it, the other 2.5 pounds or so, 2 pounds is actual like lean muscle tissue. If that is going well, there's no point in changing something that isn't broken. But sometimes like at that point, like I had someone recently too, like it was towards, week, 8 or 9, their joints were a little beat up. We did a deload for a week still. So then I was like, look, then we'll adjust this. And then we introduced like a low dose of NPP for the last like 5 weeks of that growth phase. So that would be like something more like just a typical example. If they have certain body parts that we want to bring up to, implementing like a short acting like insulin on certain muscle group days that need to come up. If it's someone that has a really fast metabolism that can handle this, some of the craziest like tissue transformations, every now and then I'll do like potentially like a Lantus saturation phase where they utilize a long acting insulin, but that is definitely not for everybody because most people will just end up accumulating a shit ton of body fat.
Yeah.
But there are some people that you would consider and put into that category of being hard gainers, that they fall into a good candidate to run something like that.
Okay, cool. I actually like that. That sounds like something that I would expect from some hard gainers, to be honest.
Yeah.
So how long is that cycle in total?
So let's say that cycle was anything from at least 12 to 16 weeks.
Okay. So after the 16 weeks is over, then what are you doing?
And again, like I don't just tell people, all right, pump the brakes. That's it. I will taper them off over a 3-week time span, cut like that anabolic load down gradually over 3 weeks until we get to a physiological range. Once they're in that range, then we shift gears and adjust the training a little bit because I tell them, I said, look, right now you're not in enhanced like recovery ranges right now, hormone ranges. So there's no point in going to the gym and beating yourself to an oblivion. So I would adjust the training to where they're still going to the gym, but they're not, crushing their central nervous system. They're giving their body a break. And then for, a time frame, our goal is just to work on holding on to all the new tissue that you put on and setting your body up for the next push that we'll go into. And then after that, we'll usually do labs at the end of that. But I also do like doing labs when they start that off season, 5 weeks into that phase.
Does that vary much how long that phase is?
Oh, absolutely. Of course it could. I had someone that would just, and I didn't realize, I'm like, wow, like I haven't had someone he was in that phase for about 18 weeks, 19 weeks. It was just because he was responding so well that I wanted to, maximize that as much as possible.
Are you talking about the off season or the recon?
The off season, off season. That it went a lot longer. He was actually supposed to go into prep, and I said, look, like things are going so well because most of the time in the off season, there becomes a point where you get to the point where you're just accumulating shit weight, and you just become like insulin resistant, and you're not really moving the needle in terms of like putting on actual skeletal muscle tissue. You're just carrying extra weight and it's putting extra stress on your body. That's where the time is to switch gears, take that little bit of a recomp, reset a little bit, and then go into another push. That's why that phase can vary, where it can go longer. It really depends on the person. And that's also why I like to do labs when they're in that push. And this particular individual that ended up going more than like 18 weeks in that off season, and it was probably even longer than that, I had him do labs at 5 weeks in, and I had him do them again at 16 weeks in. And then things were not really that bad. Of course, I saw some fluctuations in certain markers, which I expected to. I mean, he was, 20 pounds heavier than he was the 10 weeks or 12 weeks prior, but we were in a good place to continue to push and extend it another 3 or 4 weeks.
What about the recomp duration?
Absolutely. So like the same thing we discussed in the beginning, everyone's body metabolizes like these hormones and drugs totally different. There are some people that I can't believe, like they go back to like an optimal baseline like that in 4 weeks. They're ready, they're right back where they need to. And then I have these 2 guys from Brazil. It's a shame because they're incredible clients. They've made such good progress, but it takes at least like 10 weeks to get them back to what I would consider an optimal like baseline, like where their lipids are perfect without using any sort of like, Zeta or, using any sort of like blood pressure medication. It takes them like a lot longer than some other people. Okay.
So if that client who went to that baseline in 4 days after they came back off,
for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Okay. Okay.
Not 4 days.
All right.
But yeah.
4 weeks. How long would you extend that recomp phase for, or would you immediately start back up?
Like if everything on like, if they're showing you to, and again, their feedback to you, the way you assess things, 50% of it is like 50-60% is your biomarkers that you're reading through blood work. But the other 40 to 50% of it is also like on how is this person like feeling, like how's their body feel in the gym? If all of that is good and you have everything, then yeah, like there's no rules to saying like somebody needs to take off. This is exactly how long it takes. No, it's really different from person to person. And there are some people that I'm like, wow, like you're lucky, like your body, metabolizes these drugs very well where, it's not negatively impacting any of your health markers.
Do you feel like 4 weeks though is enough for that person to take off of gear for them to
usually no
have the same response?
Usually you need more than that, and depending on what it is that you're taking, a lot of these compounds can stay peaked in the bloodstream for a longer period of time. Mm-hmm. So no, like usually you're looking at like on those recomps like closer to 8 weeks. But no, there are some people that do have to take off longer. Some people that almost have to take off as long as they were on for. That's usually not that typical, but there are. And I know, like from doing this for a while, I know speaking like Jay Cutler and Phil Heath, Jay would come off like everything, even testosterone, for like three months and not doing anything. Yeah, and that's a whole nother debatable thing where you hear about people that talk about androgen receptor sensitivity, that they don't get sensitized, which technically on paper that's true, but it's not. It has to do more with your satellite cells.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I wanted to discuss with you. So,
and actually, I want to ask you this question.
Okay.
Let me ask you. The first time that you ever used steroids, how much muscle did you put on? That's a hard question to ask you, actually, because
mine's fucked up.
I know. I just thought about that.
Mine sucks, dude.
I know. You're like the only one I couldn't really ask that.
Yeah.
But typically speaking, most people don't even know what the hell they're doing the first time that they're using anything. They usually would have put on significant amount of muscle tissue. And then the next time and later on, they're unable to really mimic that type of effect that they get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's why, but again, like you'll hear people that'll say about you don't lose androgen receptor like sensitivity, which they're referencing. I know, because I years ago looked back at it, this one study, and it doesn't have to do with androgen receptors. I believe it has more to do with your satellite cells. So, but you have to think about it. It's like the same thing as like a autophagy. Like if you are starving like something of, let's say like androgens, whatever, eventually then when you go back on, you're going to have a more optimal response to if you just kept cranking up the dose, than if you were to do that. Then you would be able to go back on not as high of dose as you would have if you just kept gradually increasing more and more.
So what kind of camp would you say that you're on if you had to pick a camp? Because I think nowadays we're seeing a lot of coaches and a lot of clients who are running gear throughout almost their entire off season, and they have like one health phase a year, for example. And that health phase is when they come off. Versus I feel like the old days you had these,
where they would come completely off or
on and off cycles, fucking cruises and PCTs, blasting. You had blast and cruise, and then you also had blast and like PCT and come off and etc. But like they would have these structured out cycles where, like, say you have 16 weeks on cycle, 8 weeks off, or these off and on times would depend on when the cycle to whatever they believed that you should come off for. Some people were like, oh, you should come off for half the time. These were just random theories that people threw out, right? So I guess it sounds to me like you actually feel like even in an off season you have structure with someone, even if their health is on point throughout the entirety of the off season, say their blood work, all the markers are always in range. How often would you have them come off? But
eventually, though, if you're blasting and you are increasing food, there's something that is going to shift.
Yeah,
eventually
there's something that puts the brakes on
for sure. And then remember, it also is contingent on the environment. A thing that I run into a lot, where I call this like a bridge phase. You're in your off season, but you know that you want to do a show, let's say 20 weeks from now. So you're at the point then, like when, let's say you push that to the point where you're, 20 weeks out. And from there, like if you do a bridge phase, like what I might do in a case like that, where you're going from an off season and you're going to be going into prep soon, you might just take a phase then where, you have a 4-week window where you come off of most of all the other like androgens, and let's say you would run like a slightly higher TRT dose of tests instead of running like 180 or 200, could run like 300 milligrams of testosterone and potentially leave growth hormone and insulin in, since, that's not really impacting your endocrine system during those bridge phases. Or those bridge phases, that's when like peptides become really beneficial, during those types of like what I would consider bridge phases where you're going from one phase to another, even if it's coming out of prep too. Yeah.
Okay. Do you ever cut during these bridge phases? What do you do? Do you normally like try to maintain when it comes to the person's nutrition, or?
So the consensus is like, you want to try to hold on to like 95, 96% of all the tissue that you accumulated in the phase before. That should be the really consensus. And to try to have your body fat be in a very like, to be in an optimal place too, during that time. But you want to be careful, obviously, that you're not cutting down your, calorically too much during that time, because you don't have the PEDs to fall back on,
right?
Like as much,
right? Yeah, I totally agree.
And 100%, like people will grow better to keeping your body fat in a very, very good place. Because I've done it both ways, every way you could imagine, and you grow more effectively if you are keeping yourself like in good body composition, keeping yourself insulin sensitive. You shouldn't really have to lose more than like 15% of your total body weight when you're in prep. You should stay about within 15% of what your stage weight would be close to.
I'm in the camp of like, I really like the idea. I really like the idea of doing a how do you explain this? Doing a very slow cut in your health phase or your bridge phases, just so that you can get into a more insulin sensitive place where you can get your body fat percentage lower by the time that you start the next phase. And I do also believe in muscle memory to an extent, even though I know the fresher muscle is harder to hold on to. I do believe that if you focus on primarily maintaining your strength and then just reducing the total volume to try to, compensate for, I think how much you can take with less calories and less gear.
You nailed it on the head. And a big mistake that people make is when they go into their off season and they're going into prep and they transition too quickly and they start cutting like too quickly. The first thing that goes is the new tissue that you just accumulated, that you should be able to hold on to like 96, 98% of that new tissue in close to physiological hormone ranges. That's how you know you need to let that tissue, that new tissue, solidify. And if you make that switch too rapidly, the first thing that's going to be accustomed to go is all that new tissue that you just put on.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to kind of debate you on this, but I think that I think there's not any debate, because you're kind of in the same position that I am in, and also as Broderick Chavez is, where essentially like you're still going to be taking your off season is going to consist of cycles and phases where you come off in order for you to. We don't really know exactly what this is, but he and I were discussing that we believe it's really just kind of like you build a tolerance to these drugs. It has nothing to do with
if you want. I actually have. I could look back, because again, like I'm big on like data. I could send you some like clinical stuff, and I know it has a lot to do with your satellite cells. And like you just ask anyone, like typically like, yeah, the first cycle that you did, your response to it was incredible. Now, yes, there are things that play into that, obviously, because you've never been in those types of enhanced hormone ranges. Yeah. You're also like in the beginning, like you're going to put on a lot more tissue in the very beginning, because this is all new to your body in terms of like training. That's why even when I was in college, I wrote like a thesis paper on elite level, like Olympians, on how much tissue they put on in a year. And I was getting information down to like how much they were spending a year on like drugs. And remember, these are people that are impeccable with all their programming. And it broke down to like, I think it was like 3.5 pounds of tissue a year. Now, to somebody that doesn't know, like, and they see that, the person spent between $30,000 and $90,000 a year on, especially back then, because growth hormone was not as easily accessible and it was expensive. That doesn't seem like a lot, but you got to remember, for somebody that's been competing at that high of a level for that long, it is, because then the longer you've been competing, the more they're at that higher level where it's harder to put on that significant tissue than it would be for someone that just started competing 2 years ago.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I have another thing that I want to bring up with you. I remember you saying in one of the podcasts, I think you guys were discussing when you feel like you should be taking more PEDs, whether or not it's the prep or the off season. And I think both of you guys stated potentially the off season.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to hear your input as to why.
So, a couple of reasons, a good analogy I'll give you. After you're done competing in a show, and this is pretty much well known amongst the bodybuilding industry, one of the biggest windows of opportunity that you can put tissue on is after the show, because from the insulin sensitivity standpoints, like after a show, you could ultimately put on a significant amount of tissue on very, very minimal like PEDs after a show from the sheer, like just from an insulin sensitivity standpoint. Now, when you're in the off season, typically like after you're past a certain threshold, 8 weeks, 9 weeks, right? You're pushing food. Eventually your insulin sensitivity starts to like decline, even, with the amount of like weight that you're carrying, that you don't have these extra avenues that are helping you put on tissue. So that's when you need to start pulling other levers. And the other levers a lot of times are, having to increase certain PEDs. And even looking at like your training performance, you got to remember, like, take a step back and just look. They're called performance enhancing drugs. They're supposed to enhance your performance in the gym. So you want to like look at that. And typically, at certain points in different phases, you may be hitting a wall. So you need to look at, what levers do we need to pull? Even though like I'm someone that actually does not like using Halo at all that much. Like I feel like there's so many better alternatives, like Superdrol, like in terms of like aesthetic results. But I had a guy that he's been to the Olympia like 2 or 3 times. He has no chest at all. Done everything, but one pattern that I kept noticing, I'm like, brother, I hate to break this to you, but you're not putting on slabs of tissue on your chest, pressing 85 or 90 pound dumbbells for 10 reps. Like that is not happening. Like we need to be at a certain threshold in the gym. So with this particular individual, I had him on his push days, start doing Halo on his push days, because I needed to have some sort of accessory that was going to improve that athlete's performance in the gym, to move that. I knew that the only way to grow that area was we needed to perform better in the gym. So now this is something usually that I would not usually typically be my go-to. Yeah. But I noticed with him, like progressing everywhere else, but his chest, all of his compound like pressing movements sucked. So I had to go ahead. And that was the thing that actually moved the needle. But if you actually look at like Halo structurally on paper, it doesn't do anything really to change you aesthetically directly. But if you have someone like in that case, or they're in prep and let's say their performance markers are taking a 25% or more hit, well, that's going to negatively impact the aesthetics of your physique. And then by adding that in, hell yeah, that's going to be able to have you hold and build more muscle tissue then. Right.
Yeah, for sure. I will say though, I believe there's an extreme significant difference in the look from a fullness standpoint when you implement something like Winstrol.
Oh, Winstrol, of course. Winstrol or Halo. Winstrol. Yeah, of course. Winstrol, definitely. I would say it's one of the few, like, I feel like pre-contest, like essentials, but I do feel like it yields some pretty harsh side effects.
Yeah, I
definitely.
agree.
Like if I look at a bottle of Winstrol, my hair falls out.
Same.
But it works phenomenal.
Yeah.
It gets you super dry, super hard. It does, Mastron's another really, really good one. Like the harder and leaner that you get, the better that it works.
Right. I know that in the industry, there's more coaches and more clients that implement a larger gear load in their prep than they do in the off seasons. And I would say some of the reasonings are because they run the off seasons for longer. But at the same time, some of these people are also not taking the bridges that you are taking in the off seasons as well. And I think I have, my mind on this has kind of changed a little slowly in the past year or so. And I believe that it's actually more optimal to take these bridge phases and these additional health phases, just like taking normal cycles like you would back in the day where you're taking like a 16-week cycle, for example, and then building up that cycle base off of how much you can tolerate and take without skewing markers too much, but still making mentionable progress over the course of that cycle.
If you just stayed on, how do you know realistically how much of that is actual muscle tissue?
Yeah.
Because remember, the mechanism of action of all performance enhancing drugs, they increase your muscle cells' ability to uptake glucose and glycogen, right? And that's also another reason why like people that go for like even DEXA scans, these in-bodies, it can be great data, but mind you, because I'm sure you've probably seen this, somebody go for one of them in 6 weeks after they start their off season, they're like, look, I put on 10 pounds of muscle. No, you didn't. It's because when you do compare it, yes, you can use a DEXA scan, but you would need to compare it when you're on the same anabolic load for that same time, or you're in physiological range for a certain period of time. You can't compare it from, like I was on TRT and I'm checking it again 6 weeks later, or even 3 weeks later. It's going to show that you have significantly more muscle tissue because that's how it's measuring it, because it's increasing the muscle cell's ability to uptake glucose and glycogen. And that's going to give you a false kind of perspective on actually how much like tissue it is. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you're staying on that whole time, if you're able to maintain 98, 96% of that tissue in a physiological hormone range, you know then that tissue has solidified. And you don't have to worry as much of when you go into prep, oh man, like when I start pushing my conditioning, is this new tissue going to be the first thing that goes?
You don't think you implement a higher gear load though during prep? If you like, do you ever like implement, or do you ever add things such as like Proviron?
Absolutely.
Winstrol.
Yeah, of course.
You don't feel like that creates a total gear load that's higher than,
you know what, like if I was to sit down and really, yeah, it probably does. Yeah. But it's at certain times, like I'll usually start on a dose like of Winstrol very low at 6 weeks out. Then around 4 to 3 weeks out, we'll increase it. But what I'll also do, instead of like cranking the doses of that up, I'll increase the Proviron, because ultimately the way Proviron works too, it's ultimately enhancing the effects of the other drugs that you're taking without having to crank up the doses of them. And it's not nearly as harsh on you either. Like you could take like a lot of Proviron. Like I'll tell you, like some of the most peeled people I've ever worked with, I've had them the last week at the show do 150 to 200 milligrams a day of Proviron. But it's better than having them do 125 milligrams of Winstrol a day. So yeah.
Okay. If you're down, we need to run up another podcast sometime soon so we can talk about a bunch more shit.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that we get to this Q&A. And so we have some people to, if you're down.
Yeah.
I'm trying to make sure that I get to almost everyone's questions from now on.
Superdrol is another good one that you and I have talked about too. That one can be a real game changer for a lot of people. But for some reason, there's still like 15% of people, even though it's not supposed to do this because it's ultimately methylated masteron, that there's some people it makes them fucking hold subcutaneous water.
Yeah. Would you say that you see lighter skinned guys be able to utilize Superdrol more efficiently versus like the darker skinned guys?
Lighter skinned guys? Yeah.
Versus like the darker skinned guys will hold a little bit more water subcutaneously.
You would use it more with people, let's say that as you're pushing their conditioning, you're worried about like them losing some of that fullness and roundness. That's really where it works phenomenal.
Yeah.
While you're pushing the conditioning to that next level, and it works super quick.
Okay. Craig Goliath says, how long have you and Goliath been friends for?
Oh, I love Craig. He's
I fucking love Craig too.
He's like one of my favorites. I've known him probably for like 5 or 6 years at least, but he truly is like one of the realest, down to earth, like funniest people you'll ever meet.
No, dude, he's great.
I told him like he needs to have his own like TV show. Like I do. He's a great guy.
It's nuts, man. And the way that he like upgraded his place too, and just his lifestyle.
Oh, dude, he's
fucking, his lifestyle's nuts.
No, and like he's smart with his stuff. Like he got his house for a good price. He's like put money into it and like really built looks phenomenal.
It's insane.
Yeah.
It's so fucking sick, dude. Shiva asks, can I run HGH and IGF-1 LR3 together, or just one compound for off season?
Yes, you can. You can run them. You can technically run them together. Like my opinion on like IGF, the only real true IGF is like if you're going to run Increlex. I mean, that's real IGF. If you want your best bang for buck, make sure you're taking real exogenous growth hormone. You can take insulin with that. And when you run growth hormone, just make sure that you periodically take occasionally like 1 or 2 days off from it a week.
Okay. That's
when people get themselves into trouble.
I want to test you with a thing. So if you think that IGF-1 LR3 and DES is not like the benefits and the actual effect it has on your hypertrophy is benign, how do you feel like its effect on tumor growth is?
I think again, like if it's actual real IGF, I think it could have benefits like more so like locally, like injecting it, like if you're doing IGF dis into the actual muscle that you're training.
Right.
Yes. But then again, like if it was real IGF and you did have like a carcinogenic tumor cells, it can definitely exacerbate the growth of those for sure. But I think a lot of the IGF that you see that are on some of these underground like peptide companies, I don't think that a lot of them are legit. And what I would compare them to, actually a good analogy, I would compare it to taking Serostim HGH or like Genotropin, like Pfizer HGH pens, compared to taking like Epimorelin. Like compare those two, you wouldn't really be able to. That's like the difference between taking Increlex and IGF-1.
Okay, gotcha. I like to debate people a little bit with this because I took IGF-1 from compounding pharmacy. So I got
LR3.
I got it from Optimize HRT and then Transcend back in the day when I was with Transcend. So not from an underground source or a gray lab. But I didn't say that correctly. I just don't want to blame all my leg growth in the last 2 years on just my training, Like
what were you doing like with it?
I made a difference in my training for sure. Like I went up to a frequency of training my legs twice a week, and then I was doing.
And were you tapering it like up every week? And would you do it for like 5 weeks, and then like how long were you running?
I focused more on my strength on the hack squats on the first compound exercise, and making sure I increased that, and I did over the course of those however long. Hack squats were improving slowly over time, which was fucking awesome, right? But
so your performance, you'd say, increased by like 20% from week 1 to the end of your of those compounds.
I have it in my notes, but I don't. Maybe I can just tell people. Yeah, hold on, I'll bring it up. I feel like I'm on my phone in the gym a lot because I'm writing down I'm like recording my sets and reps.
It's good to record the top sets though.
Yeah, for sure. I will say it gets fucking annoying though. I hate looking at my phone.
But I will tell you whatever it may be that you felt that was increasing those performance markers on that top set, even if it was a placebo effect, whatever it may be, that for sure is definitely what was moving the needle, is that you were improving on those markers.
I remember discussing this in our last podcast that you were saying that training is the number one factor when it comes to growth, of course, like if you're progressing as you should be. But I think
and it doesn't matter. It doesn't mean just like weight either in reps either, because that would be impossible then if someone just got stronger every 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of like, let's say, you're squatting 315 this year and then you do next year. Are you able to move the weight better? If you're training quads, are you able to maybe now squat that 315 and get a little bit better like knee flexion? That's more so like, that still falls into, like hypertrophy and progressive overload.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Totally agree with that. I think what I'm trying to say is like, just, I focused so hard on the training aspect. Of course I did, but it's like the fact that they just blew up so much is hard for me to say that it was just the food that me progressing the food and the training properly, and that the IGF-1 did not somehow contribute. Like me injecting localizers like straight into the quads before my workout did not contribute to my progress in the gym in any case, I mean,
so, it's possible, but you did notice though that your performance improved.
Yeah, for sure. But that's how I do everything in the off season, is like all on is my performance improving in some kind of way.
Yeah. Now, the only way you'd really be able to tell that would be
if I just did again and just did not use it or something.
Exactly. But I'm telling you, if you're moving the needle in the gym, you're going to make improvements obviously if you're eating and recovering the right way too.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm going to use IGF-1 primarily. I'm not using it on my legs whatsoever anymore this year. So
like I said, like if it's legit, it's good to use it like locally in areas that Yeah.
I'm going to be curious on just how much my body, my proportions change. I'm going to be focusing on my upper body a lot more this year, or I have been.
Yeah.
So legs are last priority now. And I'm curious
and
how much
you
that
were
will make
increasing the dose a little bit each week.
I was increasing it a little bit, but not each week, because I was only using it once or twice each week. And then the off season was prolonged for quite a long time. So there's a period where I was using it, then I stopped using it for a little bit, and then I used it again. And how much I increased it was only from 30 to 50 micrograms total. So like there wasn't very much increasing, if you know what I mean. Like it was like 30, and then it was like 35 for a few weeks, and then it was like 40 for a few weeks. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I'll guarantee you that the training was the main thing that moved the needle. I'm sure. Right. Were you taking anything else?
Testing Primo. Same normal GH.
Yeah,
for sure. But it's like, why was it the legs and not everything else? Like, why was I able to change my proportions so much is really the question.
Was your performance markers improving just as much in other muscle groups?
A little bit in the back, but not quite as much in my upper body as the legs.
The back is tricky too. Before we started this, remember I was telling you.
Yeah, we were talking,
With back training, it's totally different than any other muscle group, because one, like the exercise selection is everything, and that could vary from person to person. And if you're just going off of like your strength and reps, what happens with back a lot of times, if people are trying to go say too heavy, you start pulling with secondary muscle groups. And back's different because it's almost like your arms are these rods that are connected to your back, and your arms are holding the weight, but you have to focus on isolating the muscles in your back to contract, where if you don't, you can move the weight in a similar plane, but be using other muscle groups to do it. Where, if you get on a hack squat and you go down to the floor and you come up, you could shift different muscles that you're using. But at the end of the day, like your legs are working to get that muscle from point A to point B. With where back, you really have to focus on making sure that you're connecting in the right areas, doing the right movements and exercise selection.
Right. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Andrico48 asks, top 5 coaches besides yourself.
So like, I think every coach has certain strong points. So like, I'm friends with like Chris Aceto, and known him and have a lot of respect for him. He's very, very good, and this only comes from experience, being able to see things in someone's physique that, like, to be able to tell, like, if someone's physique is stressed out, the difference of, is the physique flat? Is it retaining water? Because a lot of coaches, especially if they haven't been doing this for 10 or 15 years, those to the naked eye can yield a similar look, like where someone could look like they're retaining water when they're flat, because if they're flat and the muscle's not pressing against the skin and it's not making the lines deep, that to someone that's not experienced could, you know, they could think, oh, let's take a diuretic, and then that would just make the issue worse. So I think he's obviously up there. He produces obviously, like, you know, results. I think somebody that's got a similar coaching style probably to myself would be like Chris Tuttle. Similar education system. We kind of have the same moral beliefs about a lot of things too.
Yeah. I've said you guys are pretty similar. Podcast a few times.
I mean, we pretty much, we did a podcast together like 2 months ago, and it was, we were pretty much right along the same kind of spectrum with our beliefs and stuff. A person that I feel like doesn't get enough credit, and he's been a good dear friend of mine for years, is Phil. I saw you did a podcast with him. He knows a lot of stuff that most coaches would not know, and he's correct on right. Things to do, like more on like a cellular level with things like that. I think that he is very, like, you know, that he's underrated. I think that the two coaches that I work with are probably like two of the best, and that's why I have them working with me, especially with like females. Tolga, he's very big on like data, even more than myself. Like his wife is a top female bodybuilder. And if I showed you like what she's done in terms of PEDs in her career, you would never, ever believe it. But if you take her and you go into the gym, it'll make perfect sense. I've never, in the 20 years I've been around this, I've never seen my fiance Amanda is very strong and trains extremely hard. But her thing is she just trains almost like overtrains, where she trains like that all year round when she's in a recomp, where I try to tell my Amanda, like, you have to pump the brakes a little. Like there's a time to hit it really hard, and there's a time where we're just trying to hold on to everything and set your body up. But his wife, when she's like in her off season, dude, she put 6 plates on a hack squat and did it. I'm talking about with impeccable form for like 12 reps, and I could barely even do it. So like, but he's implemented these things into her and showed her how to get to this point. And you could see the transformation that she made, and it's impressive because it was done with like minimal PEDs. So I would consider, you know, both of them, I would say that they are good. And I think there's a lot of coaches that have the capability of being very good if they didn't have like maybe 400 or 500 clients. Like I could make sense of their programming. I did a consult with 2 guys from Brazil, and they actually worked with Stefan, boss of Outlaw. And they're like, I was so flat, like at the Olympia, and I'm looking at their diet. I'm like, and they're like he wasn't feeding me. And he peaks everyone the exact same. And I'm like, what do you mean he wasn't feeding you? They're like, yeah, like this is only like 100 and something. I'm like, brother, do you realize like the food is measured uncooked? You know that? And they're like, what? I'm like, so you worked with him for 4 months and you didn't know the food was measured. But what I'm getting at is, if you have a little more time to pay attention to these details, this is something you should be able to catch like that. I mean, just look at the guy's like physique. He ate 900 grams of carbs. He looks like he was still in a concentration camp for a week. Something's not adding up. But when you have 400 people, you're just sending like a thumbs up, or like you need to sit down and be focused at the task at hand. It's the same thing with like peaking athletes. I had a big coach that wanted to merge with me. I'm not going to name his name, but everyone would know who this person is. I went to a show with him. And he had like 6 or 7 heavy hitters doing one of the big national shows. But that whole 3-day process, him and his friends are drinking, they're smoking weed. I'm looking at them and I'm like, this is like the time that is go time. Like, you need to deliver for these people. Like, these people have dedicated years and years of their lives. Like, this is the time now where you need to do your diligence. And I'm like, I don't care how big of a name like somebody has or whatever, like that I can't respect on a professionalism standpoint that, because the least a coach can do, if somebody is really putting in all the work that it takes, to be successful at this level, you need to deliver for that person then, if they're doing everything that is being asked of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Party time at Nationals fire.
Yeah. Some people think it's like, but like, that's me at like work. Like, I need to be like focused. Like, would you feel comfortable? Like if you were walking into a room and I was sitting there ripping back shots, like, yeah, you look great, Niall. Like, like what?
That'd be pretty wild. Yeah. Mateo Fit asks, how do you peak and prep type 1 diabetics differently? I've been experiencing very rapid blood glucose drops.
Amazing question. So he's asking like type 1 diabetics. Is that what he's asking?
Yeah.
So like, number one, it's entirely different. A person that's a good example, and it's been really hard, like trying to have him make this transition mentally, is Stan. So Stan got something very rare, which is called, it's pretty much diabetes 1.5, where most diabetes is people get in their adolescent years, but there are people that get it later on. Like, and in his case, like sometimes people can get this when it's a lot to do with your epigenetics, and your environment can pretty much exacerbate this transition, which is an autoimmune disease.
Why is it not considered type 2?
Why it's not considered type 2?
Yeah.
Because the beta cells are shot. Like you need exogenous insulin to go about your day and eat food. That's type 1 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, 96% of type 2 diabetes is reversible. Your pancreas is still producing insulin. Type 1, you need to use exogenous insulin at that point.
Okay.
Where it's an autoimmune condition where it attacks your beta cells.
I see.
But it could be, some people end up getting it later on.
I see.
And bodybuilders, let's say that if it runs in their family.
Like it was his little brother or something that had that too,
and I found that out after. And then Stan is so like on point on certain things, like where, he didn't he was just doing what he was told. But when we really looked at it on the calendar, there was 18 months where he didn't have a day that he did under 6 to 10 IUs of growth hormone, and splitting it up multiple times a day, which that's asking for it. Now, most people maybe not would have turned into a full-blown type 1 diabetic, but it was a recipe of a perfect storm. But no, peaking a type 1 diabetic. But what I was getting at for him, Stan used to be able to fill him out would be very, very hard. Like his low carb days back in the day would be like 500 grams of carbs. Now his higher carb days are at that, and he holds glycogen much, much, much longer now. The other thing too, you got to take in consideration too, peaking a type 1 diabetic is totally, totally different. You can't use diazides, it'll spike their blood sugar through the roof and you won't be able to get it go back down. If you're going to use diuretics, you have to use a loop diuretic. And even if you do use a diuretic, you have to be very careful, because once you dehydrate, the first thing that happens is you start running higher blood sugar. So yeah, how you're peaking them is totally different. You got to remember, like a lot of times they're not going to need as much food as somebody that isn't a diabetic, because you're using exogenous insulin.
Okay. Gotcha. That makes sense. The Alex Fowles asks, where should someone start if they're trying to fix chronic IBS they've had their entire life?
Well, first thing is 2 things. You go and you should get your blood work done. You should check certain inflammation and autoimmune markers that you can do through blood work for super cheap. after that to make sure that, because a lot of times IBS sometimes just stands for somebody telling you have a gut problem that they have no idea what to diagnose. So we're just going to call it IBS, when they don't know if it could be Crohn's disease, it could be colitis. So the first thing is to get a set diagnosis. I would also go ahead and do a GI map. Those two things right there are going to go ahead and they're going to give you answers. You can do an endoscopy and you can see like where someone's like having issues, but those are the two really like main things. And then from there, a lot of times, like the same things that you would be doing to say repair, like the gut lining, like, like high amounts of glutamine, the oral peptide stack, that's all good. But depending on, how serious the issue is, if it's like really bad Crohn's, colitis, sometimes there's other interventions that people need to do. Like if it's a TNF inhibitor, I hate using infusions like the Remicade or Humira, but there are some people that sometimes have to do that in the beginning and then they're able to get it under control. But doing those two tests are the first steps that you should do. Okay.
No Ordinary Tom says really would like for him to break down his experience using myostatin inhibitors. I think we talked about this last podcast a little bit. Have you had any updates or any changes since then?
No.
Any new experiences?
I've been using them. Like I first used them like a long time ago, years ago. Mm-hmm.
Except like things like Follistatin would skew their markers like pretty crazy, right?
Yeah. And like the thing that I've been really, really blessed about is the people that I've been able to work alongside of, not only people in the medical field, but even other coaches, but clients that I've been able to work with that either work in the medical field or have access to pulling data. Like three of those people, or was it two of them, were type 1 diabetics. Two of them were CGMs. So when they're sending me their check-ins, they're sharing me their Freestyle Libre readings or whatever, the CGMs, and I'm seeing what it's doing to them. I think the future in performance enhancing drugs is actually going to be in myostatin inhibitors. But I think that there's still a ways off on isolating the aspects that would just relate to hypertrophy. Because I've seen YouTube videos, I'm not going to name the person's name, where they're making them sound like they're the greatest thing since apple pie. But I could tell this person has no hands-on experience actually using it. They do work phenomenal. When we get done with this, I'll show you 2 transformations that are in 20 days and your jaw will drop, I guarantee you. Mm-hmm. And it was utilizing follistatin in a certain way, but the one thing that was across the board, the people that were diabetics, which is only 2 of them, they really couldn't take it for like that much at all because it just wrecked all their diabetic markers.
How long?
Within 2 weeks, they were using 70% more insulin than they would have to, while the diet didn't change at all. And then all their lipid ratios were really bad. So like, again, you can use it effectively, but it's back to my main mission statement. The poison is in the dose and the duration.
Yep.
So you can go ahead and utilize it good 4 or 5 weeks. That's usually the threshold. The times like where I've seen it where you're running more like risk to benefit is when you go past, like start getting closer to that 8-week range. And I usually start a low dose on your training days and we'll taper it up.
Have you tried Brian Moskow's, the Gorilla Chemist's Follistatin?
I've heard about it, and somebody actually put me on a group thing where we were going back and forth. I haven't, but I read a little bit about what he was saying that wasn't it his Follistatin the one that you only need to take it, was it like once a week?
I don't remember. But they did something to make it so it doesn't skew the markers like the other.
So that's the part that I'm waiting for, because I feel like it does work really, really well, but they have to make it to the point where it's not negatively impacting all your other health markers.
Right.
Oh wait, dude, don't you have to be somewhere?
Yeah, I had an appointment at 6, but he canceled it. That's why he called.
Oh, so that worked out then.
Yeah, it worked out, but it's crazy that it's almost 7 now.
I didn't even realize it. I feel like it's only been, I thought, feels like an hour and a half, but.
No, that's the thing. It's like, okay, well, maybe the editors can keep this part of the podcast, but like, yeah, we're supposed to go like an hour and a half. And this is what happens every time is like, there's so much to talk about, even though I can tell like we're starting to get hungry, blood glucose is going down, starting to get a little like slow and everything at the end of the podcast, but there's always so much to talk about. I can't even keep this in an hour and a half. Like we're at 2.5 hours now, and I could literally, like, I'm sure there's like 2 more hours of shit that we could go off
Probably.
on. Like I didn't even get to go deep dive into training that we were talking about because like I want to make sure that we get some Q&As done.
Yeah.
But honestly, I've been holding off, but after some time, I think I'm gonna experiment with I'm gonna experiment with this Follistatin.
You can, like,
send it to
typically
me.
the people that I use it with, dude, I'm sure that you're responding so well still. Like if you're really maximizing your off season that you probably don't even need it yet. Like I think that you're still
I'm at the end of my cycle and I'm hitting a plateau. So I'm probably going to come off for some time again and then restart.
How much under your weight cap were you?
I was 17 pounds last time.
Really?
Now it's probably different. I've definitely gained a little bit because this is the leanest I've been, above 200.
And remember, like, don't look at it like one of those things like you have to be at the top of your weight cap to be competitive to win a show.
For sure. I do though want to, of course, because it's like I want to be the best.
That's your end goal. Yes.
Mhm.
Your end goal should be, I mean, if you're 17 pounds under your weight cap, you can probably, no joke, put on at least 25 pounds and get to the point where you have to suck down to actually make the weight. But that just goes to show you, like for you, what your potential is at. Because I'll tell you right now, even from your last show, if you put on 10 pounds of tissue in the right areas, then you'll be highly competitive to win a pro show.
Thank you, bro. I think my problem is trying to keep my gut and my waistline in check while I'm doing this. Like, I feel like I've talked to so many people on advice on how to do that, and I'm still having trouble. And it's nice that like everyone's like, "Oh, dude, your waist is so small and everything." Like I work so hard on like the vacuums.
That's a strong asset for you. So you need to make sure that you keep that because that's like one of your bells and whistles.
Right. What I'm trying to say is that people will probably look at my Instagram and disagree, but like when I'm taking these videos and these pictures, I'm doing a pretty strong vacuum and then I'm holding things in with my waist. So it's like whenever I let it out, it's not nearly that small. That's just, it's like Mike Summerfield, for example, where like you see his waist if he's just standing there and it's bigger, but then he pulls like his front lat spread and his waist sucks in like crazy. So I'm noticing that my resting waist circumference is still growing. And it's just so hard for me to keep in. And I'm like thinking about gut health. I'm thinking about like, you know, maintaining a reasonable level of food volume.
So like two things. One, you should check your waist measurements like periodically, but checking them also in prep and comparing them. So like when, I don't know if you had any waist measurements when you were in prep, like at around 8 weeks out, you should check those to see where those align. Cause obviously in your off season, they're going to go up like a good amount, like 2 inches or so in your off season, which is fine. That's normal. And then there's a couple of main things. Like one, remember that your abdominals are obviously a muscle. You want to be careful. Like you want to do some core work, but you don't want to put like significant muscle tissue on around like your midsection. That, and then it is also important. I do this in people's off season. I give them I make sure that it's about balance too, because the most effective plan is going to be one that someone could realistically be consistent with. Mm-hmm. So I give them a refeed window once a week where they can have a time frame where they could eat what they want. But the day after, I have them follow a fast where they take a day and instead of them eating their normal 5 or 6 meals the next day, they're only eating like 3 meals and they're fasting for a certain period of time to give their GI tract a little bit of a break. And also another reason is in the off season, if people are going ahead and they're having a cheat meal, the biggest deviator from that is usually that they're unable then to get their diet food down the next day because they ate so much. So they oversaturated their glycogen stores. So taking that day once a week, giving your GI tract a little bit of a break. I have them do a little bit of a fast. When they break the fast, they break it very specifically, like where they'll do like bone broth, a certain amount of like fruit, high glycemic index carbs, and then the other 2 meals. They're getting in a certain amount of like macros, but it's condensed into more of a time restraint like window.
Gotcha.
So those are little things that you can do that can help with that too.
That's cool. How often would you say they do these fasts on average?
Like if they're going to have a refeed window once a week, I have them do it once a week.
Wow. Okay.
I have them do it once a week, but the way that they're structured, they're still getting in the right amount of like micro macronutrients where it's not going to be negatively impacting like their growth in their off season, but it's going to help their GI tract. And on that one day, I have them also load up on different binders on that day, like activated charcoal, things like that on that day.
Okay. Gotcha. Yep. That's cool.
And everybody should too, if they're competing, especially in classic, I'm telling you should do a GI map. It's definitely worth it for sure.
How long are these fasts usually on average?
So like if it's the fast that we're doing like around the refeed window, that fast usually is about 15 hours.
Okay.
So like if they had their last meal on Saturday night, I don't know, at 9:30 or whatever, they would wait until, like 1 o'clock in the afternoon.
Day. Yeah.
Yep. And then they would have like a 6-hour window to eat that next day.
Okay. So like it's almost like literally like one average intermittent fast per week.
Yeah.
Which is
and you could also structure it differently too. I know someone else. I'll tell you now, like my partner, my other coach, Tolga, I've seen him do this. If you have a case where someone like has to be going into prep and their health markers are wrecked, the fastest way to clear up someone's health markers like as quickly as possible is by implementing some sort of like fasting. Like I have seen completely mind-blowing transformations in blood work in a matter of like a week to 10 days doing like an extensive fast. Or you could also do, because you could have the same type of autophagy benefits running a modified ketogenic diet.
Wow, man. That is so interesting. It's so fucking fascinating how much fasting can help your longevity.
That's why, like, dude, I'll tell you right now, like plans for people that have cancer, they are, the best way to describe them is whatever you do for bodybuilding, it's the total polar opposite.
It's so hilarious.
Because what you're trying to do is you're trying to inhibit, you want to inhibit mTOR and IGF, which obviously for bodybuilding, you want that. That's super important.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about anti-aging, longevity, and say like cancer prevention, it is the total polar opposite. Why do you think you see competitors that look like they're 20 years older than they actually are? No, especially in the female space. I could show you some females that are in their 20s and they look like they're in their 40s.
Right. And it's another reason why I like implementing any of these longevity protocols, including fasts. I remember Steve talking about fasts like 2 years ago as well. I think, I know I'm going to end up being one of those people like fucking Dorian Yates. You just flip the switch when you retire, just fucking like shrink all down and then start doing fasting and start doing cardio.
Yeah.
It's it's wild.
Even that waist tapering protocol, that actually kind of happened on accident, that how I came across it. And then a friend of mine, like rest in peace. Do you remember Leo Longevity?
Yeah.
So like Boston Lloyd used to be like a good friend of mine. I was telling him about people that I used to work with that had fatty liver and hepatic insulin resistance. And I would go over with him like the protocol that I would go to kind of address it. Depleting the liver of glucose is like the first thing. And then you flood the liver with the 2 forms of choline, high amounts of UDCA or TUDCA. And then he was like, and I was like, man, like this guy, like his waist got so much smaller. And he was like, yeah, of course. Like, no shit. He's like, if you were to go ahead then at the very end of it and implement a fast, he goes, watch how well that would work. And then I did that with a couple of people, and I'm talking about like 2.5, 3 inches off someone's waist in a month.
Yeah, that's crazy.
By doing that. Yeah.
That is wild. I have seen an experiment myself with some things like this to just see how much my waist would drop. It's funny, like sometimes like doing some of the fasting, reduction of food volume, and then also just like coming off the orals after prep was one of the craziest things to just see my waist just shrink out of nowhere, which is unfortunate because it's like you'd hope that your waist would be the smallest when you go on stage, but it's like the smallest my waist ever got was about 2 weeks after show day, my last show day.
And what was your weight at? Was it?
I think it was 1 pound. It might have been 1 pound below stage weight.
Yeah. And how much smaller was your waist? Was it like?
I wish I don't remember if I measured it. I don't think I measured it, but I got a bunch of pics and flicks that day.
Yeah.
So it was fucking significant, man. Like,
I mean, so I have a girl, I have like pictures of it too. I wouldn't be able to do this with like anyone. I think I told you about this. She has really, really bad Crohn's disease, and any other client, I'd have to pull her out of the show. We had to do a modified elemental diet. And then the last 36 hours was feeding her intravenously using their IV bags that like have like a 50% ratio of like dextrose in them. Mm-hmm. And I couldn't believe like how well that it worked. She ended up like winning the overall, and she still held on to like a lot of fullness, but a lot of it was just that her waist was in such good control that it just made everything look that much better.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Zach Leinhart asks, best uses if Retta for health, not weight loss.
Okay. So like, obviously it's very good for insulin resistance, obviously, and metabolic benefits, especially with like the glucagon pathway. You're ultimately getting, like, for someone like, say, that's a regular person that doesn't, say they don't work out, you're ultimately getting the metabolism benefits of somebody that does work out without having to work out. And usually like you would use Retta, and you don't need a high amount of it. You usually want to start off like at a low amount. And when you hear the microdosing, you also like, it's a big mistake to microdose it every day. That's stupid for like a lot of reasons. And one of them is you will actually have to, your body will build a tolerance to it much faster, and GLPs build in the system. The best way ultimately to take it is like once every 3 days.
Like twice a week?
Yeah, twice a week.
Okay.
And if you were going to start off like on Retta, if you were to start off at a 0.5 milligram or 0.7 every 3 days, like that's a good like starting dose. Mm-hmm. And you could maybe increase it like a little bit more as you go. And you got to remember, 2.5 milligrams of retatrutide is equal to only 1/4 milligram of semaglutide. Semaglutide is actually a much, much stronger GLP.
I mean, tirzepatide is also stronger than Retta as well, is it not?
They're
by a small margin, smaller than...
They are very little bit, but tirzepatide and Retta are a little more comparable than
semaglutide and Retta.
Yeah, exactly. It's just Retta has that third pathway.
I had this discussion too with a few people regarding the dosing protocol for Retta, and I do side kind of in the middle of like doing twice a week as well. I feel like that's more beneficial just because there's still too many people that seem to get too much fluctuation and a little bit of nausea on that first day if they do a once a week injection.
Yeah, once a week is a little.
But we were having the discussion of how it's a lot more beneficial to do it just once a week, primarily because it's like microdosing every day or any of these things starts to almost just like deflect the fact that it acts on glucagon.
Yes.
Right.
And the thing that I'm interested to see, which they don't know, is how good is it, do you think, for like somebody that's an athlete consistently then, if your liver is just constantly dumping glucose? Like, what do the long-term effects look like of that? We don't know. And any of the clinical trials that you will see are mostly going to be on regular people. So, but yeah, 3 days a week, in my opinion, is perfect. Once a week, I don't like that for that reason of if you're starting off on like a bolus dose, you have a more stronger likelihood then of having side effects. And also too, if you are somebody that is more of an athlete, your body's going to metabolize it a little more quicker too.
Okay. Gotcha. FBB Forum asks, could Dom talk about the increasingly blurred lines between pro WBB and WPD?
Oh yeah, this is a huge thing going on. You might not follow it as much, but dude, there's like so much like controversy, and a lot of it is this new athlete, and she's incredible.
Wait, can you explain that? Wait, what are both of those?
It's talking about women's physique and female bodybuilding.
Oh,
so recently, like one of my athletes just took second to phenomenal athlete. This girl, Sarah, I think her last name is Bradley.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably seen her. Like her pictures of went like viral. She's like inside out peeled, more peeled than like your classic physique pros. Like she's incredible. And the progress she's made in the last 3.5 years has been incredible. But there was so much controversy because people are saying like she is more of a fit for female bodybuilding, which in my opinion, like she is. We have different criterias for a reason. It would be somewhat similar to like Sean Clarita, won multiple Olympia titles, weighing around 176, 178. If I put a pair of classic physique trunks on him and put him in classic, that doesn't make him like classic. Yes, if you put him in classic and they judged it like a bodybuilding show, he wins all day long. But there's a distinct reason of why we have different divisions. And if you just go back and you go back to the IFBB website, they give you a description of each division. Mm-hmm. And in the difference between women's physique and women's bodybuilding, one of the biggest differences is that women's physique, they said, very, very little striations, nothing like crazy where you're cross-striated top to bottom, striated glutes, nothing too like over the top, little more muscular than figure, but nowhere near like as bodybuilding, where in bodybuilding, that's, taking all the governors off, where, in this particular athlete's case, yes, if you judge her like in a bodybuilding criteria, she wins. And I've spoken to different judges, and at this last show, this girl, Sarah, she did win. She won by 1 point, but you can tell she's kind of in that case where she's between women's physique and women's bodybuilding. But even right now, off of the bat, you put her in female bodybuilding, she's easily like top 6 in female bodybuilding. Then what is the point of having, women's physique when half the girls that are women's physique, then you're saying that could beat female bodybuilders? You get what I'm saying? Because I've done 2 consultations this year with girls that were in WPD that were bigger than my team is blessed enough that we have 5 female bodybuilders that are top 10, that were top 10 at the Olympia. Out of the 10 top 10, we have 5 of them. 2 of these girls were bigger than 2 of the girls that we have that are top 10 female bodybuilders.
Damn.
So, in my case, I'm also thinking like 2 of these female bodybuilders that I have too, they're in their 40s and they're pushing hard in the off season to put on the tissue that's needed. Should I just tell them to go down on women's physique then? Maybe, so I think that there needs to be more of a distinguishing line.
Yeah.
And the judges need to do that, which, like I'm friendly with all the judges and I've spoken to them about this, and you hear mixed things, and sometimes they can only judge ultimately what's in front of them.
Right. That's kind of what makes it so difficult, right? That's always been the main issue of how bodybuilding kind of evolves over decades, is they're just really just trying to judge what's in front of them.
They're going to have to probably but they shouldn't. My whole thing is they shouldn't have to put a height and weight cap on it, because ultimately if you're judging the show the way that it should be, then you don't really need to do that if you're judging based on what the criteria is. You know what I mean?
No, I know what you mean.
I see guys sometimes in classic too that
I think what the problem is that they're having, like, each independent judge is having trouble prioritizing and ranking exactly which of these characteristics should take priority when they are judging it. You know what I'm saying? Like, how much does the size of your waist actually weigh versus your fullness and your conditioning on stage? Like, how much, like, where should Nick Walker actually be placed in open bodybuilding? I just think that they're having trouble.
The problem is that there's no, this is the thing. And I know this because I know a lot of different judges in different areas, that as a coach, I know based on who's judging the show, what that judge looks for. And I know what some other judges look for. Like if it's, Steve, Bill, Jack, Tyler, they like a more like conditioned physique, where if it's like Sandy or Becky, they like a little bit more like
aesthetic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but what it boils down to is there just needs, I feel like, to be more like unity amongst the IFBB, where they have to have like some sort of like quarterly or yearly like meeting where they're like, this is the standard. This is what we're looking for. Cause I see it in classic physique sometimes too, like where I'm like, okay, like the guy looks good, but in my opinion, he's more of a 212 bodybuilder than, fitting classic. Like for classic, you would think, small waist, great lat to waist ratio, good structure. I feel like that should be like, that should mean a lot when you're judging the criteria for that division.
Yeah, I do too. The trouble is also just like, I guess it's how each person views things. So I totally agree. Like having these meetings, hopefully, and being like, this is the standard, should help a lot.
Yeah. And if a judge, like if they don't know that, then they're going to judge it just the way a bodybuilding show is. Who has the most muscle, like, and who's the most shredded. But you just have to look at like, what's the criteria that we're judging on,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I do think in some of these divisions, though, they've been doing a great job of honing down on what they're looking for now. I think open bodybuilding and classic is looking pretty great.
Yeah.
IMO. And like, even like the results for the last Olympia in both, I think made sense, particularly classic. But, yeah, there's still some divisions I think that they're trying to work on, like bikini and women's physique and bodybuilding.
Yeah, bikini, like women's physique and female bodybuilding in particular. And it would be really good because there was like a die-off where this year, there's not that many female bodybuilding shows this year. And like after this next week, there's only like Tampa, Atlanta, the Rising Phoenix. So there's literally only like 4 shows in the United States. So what's going to end up happening right now at the Olympia, you're going to have really, really good, like a couple really good female bodybuilders that are not going to be at the Olympia this year because there's not that many shows where, and I know why they're doing it. It's because last year they had some shows like New York. There was only 3 female bodybuilders at New York Pro. Like it's a bad look, but if they had some great athletes like this girl, Sarah, that were coming into that division, that would help tremendously. And there's also a lot of figure girls that should be going into women's physique.
Yeah. I ask everyone one last question at the end of every podcast, but if you were to disappear from the world tomorrow and you had one message you could send to the entire world today, what would the message be?
Oh man, that's such a hard thing to answer. That to remember that the things that we do today, to think about what your future self would want, to think about that. Because I even, when I did Jay Cutler's podcast, I asked him, I said, can I ask you, would you trade 1 or 2 of your Sandows, your Olympia titles for 5 years off your life? And he stopped and he was like, wow, I never actually thought about that. And he goes like, when I was in the heat of the moment in prep, he's like, maybe I would have, but he goes, absolutely, like, absolutely not, so like, that's why like people need to, think about things, like from a bigger perspective.
Mm-hmm.
I also feel that social media sometimes plays a horrible role in a lot of athletes, like mental psychology, like in terms of like competing, like they let that negatively impact them so much. Like social media has been both good and horrible for the competitive space at the same time.
I totally agree. I think the thing is, it's a giant muscle that you have to exercise on how to handle that properly, but you also have to be guided on how to handle it. And I think a lot of people, it's very easy for you to get, it's very easy to get lost in it and not kind of have clarity on how you should walk through the use of social media, how you should walk through having a public face. It's even kind of the same situation as like, I feel like in a more relatable sense, like say that you're not on social media and you're not in the public eye, but say that you like you're always in a relationship, for example, like back-to-back relationships.
Yeah.
And like say that you're in like a 3-year relationship and then it takes like 2 months or a month and then you're back in another one or something, for example. A lot of the times this happens because you're trying to fill something,
Mm-hmm.
May it be a sense of like this urgency or desire for a companionship or potentially even validation from a partner, could go back as far as like you're not getting some kind of that you're looking for from your parent.
Yeah.
But in these kind of situations, you almost have to take a step back and exercise like a whole new version of you where you're like, actually, I'm going to pay attention to all the things that are really awesome about just being alone, are really awesome about just being away from a partner or just focusing on myself. And sometimes some of these things, like you actually have to think about it in a way that's like, you might almost feel a little like sick or a little disgusting, thinking of like, oh man, like being with these partners, like this stressed me out way too much than I can even handle right now.
Yeah.
Like this person was fucking stressful as hell. Like you don't want to think about those sometimes like that, unless like the breakup was like very hurtful, then it's very easy for you to.
Yeah.
But you have to take yourself out and you have to like I'm not one that totally as a man really believes in a lot of these like self-affirmations, like, oh, I'm enough, and looking in the mirror. It's more of like, how do I want to attack the next few weeks? I want to be comfortable by myself, or I want to be present and love my family and friends. And then while you're in the moment, you have to continuously exercise that. Be like, oh yes, I need to do this. And it's kind of the same thing with social media, because there's so much noise out there. And especially when like one of these pages is posting you, you have to remind yourself like, what is important to you, and why does any of this matter? You know what I mean? And then just like you said, also thinking about your future, like thinking about like what kind of actions can you take right now that you may regret 2 weeks later, or that you may appreciate that you did 2 weeks later. And then literally like every hour that you're going through this, you're living through this, you have to remind yourself that, because your body works in repetition. It's whenever you do things over and over and over again that you start to change. And maybe you can implement some things for neuroplasticity. Maybe you can like, I don't know, microdose in some kind of fucking shrooms or something while you're doing this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like if you can continuously repeat these things over and over and over again, then it slowly changes you.
Yeah.
You become that person. And then sooner or later,
Absolutely.
you just don't give a fucking shit about a flying fuck about what other people are doing on social media. And you're just so focused on your goal and you're just fucking making it. And you actually feel free and you feel happy. It's like an insane
it's so hard
feeling
for people to do that.
but it's hard, especially if you're like, not everyone's like this. There's a lot of people that can handle their PEDs, but like say that you're someone that, one of some of the PEDs, like 700 testosterone is exacerbating how aggressive, how irritable you feel. Absolutely. And how much you need more.
Yeah.
And that just makes it like 10 times harder, honestly.
Yeah. Like how many people I see that you wonder how different their decisions might be if it wasn't say for social media.
Yeah.
Cause it really, really does, influence people like a lot. And even people that are like very militant, very, mentally strong, it can get to anyone. Like if you allow it to, and that's why you have to try to take a break and take a step back from it,
Yeah.
I think that I heard Andrew Barry actually speak about, which I was like, that's really good that he is like diving into that. I think he said that he has like a sports psychologist or like a therapist that he'll send his athletes to, like about the, like to really, really focus on the mental aspects of it. I think that is so important. I remember even they were getting into this a little bit when I stopped wrestling in college, but all the major Division I schools, like big programs, they all do have sports psychologists, and they are the most successful programs because you could have the most potential, but if your mind's not in the right place, that's going to dictate where the body and everything else goes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess just to kind of conclude what I was saying, like not everybody's created, like we're not all created equal, unfortunately. And there's some people that'll be able to handle it just because they're just born that way, But for the people that can't, like those are the people that have to do the extra exercising consistently.
Absolutely.
Until it becomes easier and easier and easier until it becomes like a default. And then sooner or later, it's like you almost don't have to think about it. You've just kind of changed.
Yep.
But that it takes a long time and a lot of just like repetitive, like, this is who I am. This is what I'm doing. And then it feels differently later.
Yeah. Like you actually have to implement certain things to be able to handle everything on a mental level like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool, man. Where would you like everybody to find you?
They can find me on social media, like either my Instagram or my team's Instagram, team Best Build or Dom Supersliced. And now I have a link tree there where we have like all of our like services from, if they want to like book a consultation, which I tell everyone that too, with anything, and especially like with coaching, nobody should just ever like send you your rates. You need to make sure that number one, that is the best fit for both parties, and that you're inquiring about something that's not tangible. So you want to make sure that it is the absolute best, like for you, and that, whatever it is that you're inquiring about, that, me or whoever has a full understanding of all the variables, that, that's what people should do, and that they should feel comfortable with that. And yeah.
Hell yeah. Fuck yeah.
All right.
Thanks for coming on, brother.
Awesome, man. Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me.
Love you guys. Rate us a 5-star on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and please share this and give us a comment. And every time you guys say something positive about the podcast and how you feel like it's making a difference for you, it means everything to me. So love you guys. Peace.